The night Lauren Hayes discovered her boyfriend in bed with another woman, she made a decision that would lead her straight into the arms of a billionaire by complete accident. What started as a desperate attempt to reclaim her shattered confidence turned into an encounter that would change everything. A mistaken hotel room, a stranger who listened when no one else would, and a morning revelation that left her mortified beyond words. But that humiliating night? It was just the beginning. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The rain came down in sheets that Thursday night, turning the Chicago streets into rivers of reflected neon and brake lights. Lauren Hayes sat frozen in her car, parked 3 blocks from Tyler's apartment, her hand still gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She'd been sitting there for 20 minutes, but she couldn't remember driving here, couldn't remember leaving his building, couldn't remember anything except the image burned into her brain, Tyler's face, frozen in shock as their eyes met across his bedroom, the blonde woman beneath him scrambling for the sheets. "Baby, wait!" He'd started, but Lauren had already turned, already run. Now her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Tyler's name flashed across the screen again and again, but she couldn't bring herself to answer. Couldn't bring herself to hear whatever pathetic excuse he'd fabricated in the 15 minutes since she'd fled. 2 years. 2 years of her life, of planning a future, of believing in something that turned out to be built on lies. The phone buzzed again, but this time it was Cassie's name that appeared. Lauren stared at it for a long moment before finally answering. "Where are you?" Cassie's voice was sharp with concern. "Tyler just called me freaking out, saying you left his place upset. What happened?" Lauren opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Her throat had closed up, and suddenly the tears she'd been holding back broke through like a dam giving way. "Oh, honey, no," Cassie breathed, understanding immediately. "Where are you? Send me your location right now." 20 minutes later, Lauren found herself in a dimly lit bar in the West Loop, a place Cassie had chosen specifically because none of their usual crowd would be there. Her best friend slid a martini across the table, then immediately pushed a second one beside it. "Start from the beginning," Cassie said, her dark eyes fierce with protective anger. So Lauren did. She told her about the surprise visit she'd planned. She'd gotten off work early and wanted to bring Tyler his favorite takeout. She told her about using the spare key he'd given her 6 months ago, the one that was supposed to symbolize trust and commitment. She told her about walking down the hallway of his apartment, hearing sounds that made her stomach drop, pushing open the bedroom door anyway because some horrible part of her needed to confirm what she already knew. That absolute piece of... Cassie didn't finish the sentence, just made a noise of pure disgust. "How long, do you think?" "I don't know." Lauren's voice came out hollow. "Could have been weeks. Could have been months. Does it even matter?" "It matters because you need to know just how much of a lying scumbag he is." Cassie drained half her drink in one swallow. 2 years, Lauren. You were talking about moving in together. You met his parents. You were planning a future with this man." "I know." Lauren stared into her martini, watching the olive spin slowly at the bottom of the glass. "I feel so stupid, Cass. How did I not see it? Were there signs I missed? Was I so wrapped up in work that I just... No." Cassie reached across the table and grabbed Lauren's hand hard enough to make her look up. "No, this is not on you. You trusted him because that's what you're supposed to do in a relationship. He's the one who betrayed that trust. He's the one who made the choice to destroy what you had. Don't you dare take that guilt on yourself." Lauren nodded, but the sick feeling in her stomach didn't ease. She'd always prided herself on being in control, on making smart decisions, on building a stable, successful life. At 28, she had the career she'd worked so hard for. The promotion to senior marketing strategist had just come through 3 weeks ago. She had the apartment she'd decorated exactly how she wanted it. She had the relationship she'd thought was heading toward engagement and marriage, and all those traditional milestones she'd been taught to want. And in one moment, half of that carefully constructed life had crumbled. "I just feel so powerless," she whispered, "like everything I thought I had control over was just an illusion." Cassie studied her for a long moment, then flagged down the bartender for another round. When the drinks arrived, she leaned forward, her expression shifting from sympathetic to something else, something almost mischievous. "What if you took that power back?" Lauren blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if you did something completely unexpected? Something that proves to yourself that you're in control of your own life, your own choices, your own body. Cassie, Lauren could already hear the dangerous edge in her friend's tone, the one that had gotten them into trouble more than once in college. Hear me out. Cassie pulled out her phone, scrolling through something Lauren couldn't see. You feel powerless because Tyler made you feel like your trust, your loyalty, your love didn't matter. So what if you did something that was entirely about you, your choice, your terms, your control? I'm not following. Cassie turned her phone around, showing Lauren a sleek, expensive-looking website. There are services. Very discreet, very professional services where successful women who don't have time for complications can hire male companions for an evening. Lauren felt her face flush hot. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Cassie's expression was earnest now. Not for sex. Well, not unless you want to, but that's not the point. The point is having someone who's completely focused on you for a few hours. Someone who listens, who makes you feel valued, who reminds you that you're attractive and interesting and worthy of attention. Someone who's there because you chose them, not because you had to win them over or convince them to stay. That's insane. Is it? Cassie challenged. Or is it actually taking control of a situation where you feel completely powerless? You're hurt and angry and humiliated, and you have every right to be. But sitting here drowning in that feeling isn't going to make it better. Taking action might. Lauren shook her head, but even as she did, something in Cassie's words resonated. She did feel powerless. She did feel like she'd lost control. And the thought of doing something entirely on her own terms, something that had nothing to do with Tyler or his betrayal or the wreckage of their relationship, there was something appealing about that, even if the method Cassie was suggesting seemed completely insane. I don't know, she said weakly. Look, you don't have to decide right now. Cassie pocketed her phone and picked up her fresh martini. I'm just saying it's an option. A way to remind yourself that you're a strong, independent woman who doesn't need some cheating asshole to define her worth. They sat in silence for a moment, and Lauren found herself thinking about it despite her better judgment, about walking into a hotel room and having control over the situation from start to finish, about having a conversation with someone who had no agenda, no history, no expectations beyond the professional arrangement. About doing something reckless and unexpected instead of going home to her empty apartment and crying into a pint of ice cream while Tyler blew up her phone with apologies. How would it even work? She heard herself ask. Cassie's eyes lit up. The service is very particular about screening. You submit a request with what you're looking for, just conversation, dinner, whatever, and they match you with someone appropriate. It's completely confidential on both sides. You meet at a hotel. Everything is handled through the service, and when it's over, you go your separate ways. No strings, no complications, no chance of running into him at the grocery store next week. This is crazy. Maybe. But maybe crazy is exactly what you need right now. Lauren drained the rest of her martini, feeling the alcohol warm her from the inside. Her phone buzzed again. Tyler, still trying to reach her. She declined the call without even looking at it. One night, she said slowly, just to talk. That's it. Whatever you want it to be, Cassie agreed. Your call, your rules. And this service is legitimate? Not some sketchy, completely legitimate. I know 2 women who've used it. Both had excellent experiences. Cassie paused. Well, one of them ended up in a very complicated situation when she caught feelings for her companion, but that's a different story. Despite everything, Lauren felt a laugh bubble up. It came out slightly hysterical, but it felt good to laugh. You're a terrible influence. I'm the best influence. I'm the one making sure you don't spend the next 3 months wallowing and letting that jackass think he broke you. Cassie raised her glass. To taking back control. Lauren hesitated for just a moment, then clinked her glass against Cassie's. To taking back control. Shit. 2 hours later, Lauren found herself standing in the marble lobby of the Waldorf Astoria, feeling like she'd stepped into someone else's life. This wasn't something Lauren Hayes did. Lauren Hayes made careful, considered decisions. Lauren Hayes thought things through. Lauren Hayes didn't hire male companions for the evening because she'd had her heart broken. But apparently 3 martinis and Cassie's unwavering insistence had turned her into a different person. The hotel room key felt heavy in her hand as she rode the elevator to the 15th floor. Cassie had handled everything with terrifying efficiency. making the arrangements through the service, booking the room, even picking out Lauren's outfit from the emergency clothes she kept in her car for after-work events. The simple black dress was more elegant than anything Lauren would have chosen for this situation, but Cassie had insisted. "You're not going to a funeral," she'd said firmly. "You're reclaiming your confidence. Dress like it." Now standing outside room 1517, Lauren questioned every decision that had led her to this moment. She could still back out, could turn around, go home, pretend this had never happened, could deal with her heartbreak the normal way. Ben and Jerry's, sad movies, angry texts to Tyler that she'd delete before sending. But she didn't move, because Cassie had been right about one thing. Sitting in her apartment feeling powerless wasn't going to help. And maybe doing something completely unexpected, something entirely on her own terms, would. She slid the key card through the reader and pushed open the door. The suite was nicer than she'd expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline, a king-size bed with crisp white linens, a sitting area with a plush sofa and armchairs. Soft lighting gave everything a warm, intimate glow. A bottle of wine sat chilling in an ice bucket on the coffee table, 2 glasses waiting beside it. Lauren set her purse down on the desk, then immediately picked it up again, unsure what to do with herself. Should she sit, stand, pour the wine? She checked her phone. The service had said he'd arrive at 9 o'clock, which was 7 minutes from now. 7 minutes to figure out what the hell she was doing here and what she wanted to say when a complete stranger walked through that door. Her phone buzzed. Another message from Tyler. "Please, Lauren, just let me explain. It's not what you think." She almost laughed. Not what she thought? She'd literally seen him in bed with another woman. What possible explanation could there be for that? She turned her phone off and shoved it into her purse. Tonight wasn't about Tyler. Tonight was about her. At exactly 9 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Lauren's heart jumped into her throat. This was it. Her last chance to back out, to say she'd made a mistake, to retreat to the safety of her predictable, controlled life. Instead, she crossed the room and opened the door. The man standing in the hallway was not what she'd expected. She wasn't sure what she had expected exactly. Maybe someone slick and overly polished, someone who looked like they did this professionally because they did in fact do this professionally. But the man in front of her looked almost normal. He was tall, probably in his mid-30s, with dark hair that was slightly tousled, like he'd been running his hands through it. He wore an expensive-looking suit, but he'd loosened his tie and unbuttoned his collar, giving him a slightly rumpled, approachable appearance. His eyes were what caught her attention, though, deep blue, with a kind of quiet intelligence that made her feel like he was seeing more than she was showing. "Hi," he said, his voice low and warm. "I'm sorry I'm a few minutes late. There was an issue with the—" He stopped mid-sentence, his expression shifting to one of confusion as he glanced at the room number, then back at her. "Is this 1517? He asked. "Yes," Lauren said, stepping back to let him in, though something in his demeanor made her hesitate. He didn't sound like he was reading from a script. He sounded genuinely confused. He walked into the room slowly, looking around like he was trying to figure something out. Then he turned back to her, and there was something apologetic in his expression. "I think there might have been a mistake," he said carefully. "I was supposed to be in 1537. The woman at the desk must have given me the wrong—" "Oh." The word came out flat as the realization hit Lauren. This wasn't the man the service had sent. This was just some random hotel guest who'd been given the wrong room key. "Oh no." They stared at each other for a moment, the awkwardness of the situation settling between them like fog. "I'm so sorry," he said quickly. "I'll just go and get the right—" "Wait!" The word came out before Lauren could stop it. Because suddenly, looking at this stranger who had accidentally walked into her hotel room, she felt something shift. Maybe it was the alcohol still in her system. Maybe it was the emotional exhaustion of the worst day of her life. Maybe it was the desperate need to not be alone with her thoughts for another minute. Or maybe it was the fact that he looked at her with genuine concern, like he could see she was barely holding it together, and something in his eyes said he understood what that felt like. "Could you just—" She gestured helplessly at the room. "Could you stay for a few minutes, just to talk?" He looked surprised, then concerned. "Are you okay?" And that simple question, asked with such genuine care by a complete stranger, was what finally broke her. "No," she said, her voice cracking. I'm really not. Ethan Cole had been in a lot of unexpected situations in his 36 years, but this was definitely a new one. He'd checked into the Waldorf Astoria an hour ago after a marathon board meeting that had run 4 hours longer than scheduled. All he'd wanted was a quiet room, a hot shower, and maybe a drink from the minibar before collapsing into bed. He had an early flight back to New York in the morning, and his daughter's dance recital was tomorrow afternoon. He'd promised Lily he wouldn't miss it, and he never broke promises to his daughter. Instead, he was standing in a stranger's hotel room, watching a beautiful woman with tears streaming down her face try to pull herself together. I'm sorry, she said, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. This is so inappropriate. You should just go. I don't know what I was thinking. But Ethan couldn't leave. He'd seen that look before. The barely contained devastation, the desperate attempt to hold it together, the need for someone, anyone, to acknowledge that what you're feeling is real and valid. He'd worn that look himself 5 years ago, in the months after Emma died. Hey, he said gently, moving toward the sitting area and taking a seat in one of the armchairs. Why don't you sit down and tell me what's going on? She looked at him like he was crazy. You don't have to do this. You don't even know me. No, I don't, but I know what it looks like when someone needs to talk, and you clearly need to talk. He gestured to the other chair. I've got nowhere else to be right now. That wasn't entirely true. He should probably go find the actual room he'd booked, but something in him couldn't walk away from this woman. Maybe it was the way she was trying so hard to be strong when she was obviously falling apart. Maybe it was the fact that she'd asked a complete stranger to stay, which meant she was either desperate or had no one else to turn to. Either way, Ethan had been raised better than to leave someone in pain when he could help. She hesitated for a long moment, then moved to the other chair and sank into it like all the strength had gone out of her legs. I found my boyfriend in bed with another woman tonight, she said bluntly. We'd been together for 2 years. I thought we were heading toward marriage, and I walked into his apartment and found him with someone else. Ethan felt a surge of anger on her behalf. I'm sorry. There's no excuse for that. No, there isn't. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. The worst part is I keep wondering if I missed the signs. If I was so focused on my career that I didn't notice him pulling away. If I could have prevented this somehow. No, Ethan said firmly. Don't do that to yourself. His choices aren't your responsibility. If he wasn't happy, if he wanted out, he should have been man enough to tell you instead of going behind your back. She looked at him with surprise, like she hadn't expected such a strong reaction. You sound very sure about that. I am sure about that. Loyalty matters. Trust matters. If you make a commitment to someone, you honor it or you end it. You don't destroy someone's trust and then act like they should have seen it coming. They sat in silence for a moment, and Ethan found himself wondering about the man who'd been stupid enough to cheat on the woman sitting across from him. She was beautiful, obviously. Dark hair, sharp eyes, delicate features that were currently red and puffy from crying but still striking. But there was more to it than that. There was an intelligence in her gaze, a strength even in her vulnerability, that suggested she was someone worth knowing. I don't even know your name, she said suddenly. Ethan, he offered. Ethan Cole. Lauren Hayes. She studied him for a moment. You're not from Chicago. New York. I was here for business. Heading back tomorrow. Let me guess. Finance? He smiled slightly. Is it that obvious? The suit gave it away, and the way you carry yourself. You're used to being in charge. Guilty as charged. Ethan leaned back in the chair, trying to appear relaxed, even though he was acutely aware of how strange this situation was. What about you? What do you do when you're not dealing with terrible boyfriends? I'm in marketing, just got promoted to senior strategist at Fulton & Cross. She said it with a hint of pride that made him smile. Congratulations, that's a good firm. You know them? I know of them. They handled a campaign for one of our competitor companies a few years back. Did excellent work. He paused. You should be proud of yourself. Getting promoted at 28 to senior level is impressive. 28, she repeated, then laughed bitterly. I had this whole timeline in my head, you know. Promotion by 28, engaged by 29, married by 30, first kid by 32. I had it all planned out. Life rarely follows our timelines, Ethan said quietly. Something in his tone made Lauren look at him more closely. You sound like you're speaking from experience. He hesitated, then decided honesty was the least he owed her in this strange situation. My wife died 5 years ago. Cancer. She was 31. We had all kinds of plans for our future, and then suddenly all those plans didn't matter anymore. Lauren's expression softened with sympathy. I'm so sorry. I can't imagine. She stopped, then shook her head. Actually, that's a terrible thing to say. I can't imagine. Like your pain is so foreign and distant. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. Ethan found himself appreciating the simplicity of her condolence, the lack of platitudes or uncomfortable attempts to make it better. We have a daughter, Lily. She's 7 now. She keeps me grounded, reminds me why I keep pushing forward even when it feels impossible. 7, Lauren said softly. That must be wonderful and terrifying. Both, constantly. He smiled, thinking of Lily's latest obsession with ballet and her insistence that he learn all the proper terminology for her positions. She's the best thing in my life. Everything I do is for her. Lauren was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was thoughtful. You're a good father. I can hear it in the way you talk about her. I try to be. It's not always easy balancing work and parenting as a single father, but she's worth it. He paused. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you ask me to stay? When you realized I wasn't supposed to be here, you could have just sent me on my way. Why didn't you? Lauren looked down at her hands and a flush crept across her cheeks. This is going to sound pathetic. I doubt that. I hired someone to come here tonight, she admitted. Not for anything physical, just to talk. To feel like I had some control over my life again after Tyler ripped it all away. My best friend convinced me it would help, and I was drunk and desperate enough to believe her. She looked up at him, and there was shame in her eyes. When you knocked on the door, I thought you were him, the man I'd hired. And then you seemed confused, and I realized you'd just gotten the wrong room, and You still asked me to stay, Ethan finished gently. I still asked you to stay, she confirmed, which was completely inappropriate and probably made you think I'm absolutely insane. I don't think you're insane, Ethan said. I think you're hurting, and you reached out for help in an unconventional way. There's nothing wrong with that. You're being very kind about this. My wife used to say that kindness costs nothing but means everything. Ethan stood and walked to the wine bottle sitting in the ice bucket. Can I pour you a glass? It seems a shame to let it go to waste. Lauren laughed, a real laugh this time. Sure, why not? This night can't get any stranger. He poured 2 glasses and handed one to her, then raised his own in a small toast. To unexpected encounters. She clinked her glass against his. 2 unexpected encounters. They talked for hours after that. Ethan told her about the challenges of running a company while raising a daughter on his own, about the constant guilt of never being fully present in either role. He told her about Emma, about their college romance and quick marriage, about the devastating diagnosis that came when Lily was 2. He told her about learning to be both mother and father to a little girl who missed her mom desperately, but was too young to fully understand why she was gone. Lauren told him about growing up in Chicago, about parents who divorced when she was 12, and her determination to build a more stable life for herself. She told him about working her way through college, about the ruthless world of corporate marketing, about the satisfaction of finally achieving the success she'd worked so hard for. She told him about Tyler, about the small ways she'd convinced herself their relationship was solid, even when doubt crept in, about the complete blindside of finding him with someone else. The stupidest part, Lauren said, curling her legs underneath her in the chair, is that I keep thinking about all the times he said he was working late or had guys' night or whatever. Were those lies? Was he with her then? How long was I the idiot who didn't see what was happening right in front of me? You're not an idiot for trusting someone you loved, Ethan said firmly. Trust is what makes relationships work. If you can't trust your partner, then what's the point? But clearly, I should have been more suspicious, more guarded. Or maybe he should have been more honest. Ethan leaned forward, his expression serious. Lauren, I've been on both sides of this. I've been in a relationship where trust was absolute, where I never once questioned Emma's loyalty or commitment. And then after she died, I dated a woman who made me feel like I had to constantly prove myself, constantly defend every late night at the office or business trip. That second relationship failed because you can't build anything real without trust. How long did it take you? Lauren asked quietly. To be ready to date again after Emma? 3 years, and it wasn't really about being ready. It was more about Lily asking why all her friends' daddies had special friends, and I didn't. So I tried. But my heart wasn't in it, and it wasn't fair to the women I dated. He paused. I haven't seriously dated anyone in over a year now. Lily and work keep me busy enough. Don't you get lonely? The question was so honest, so direct, that it caught Ethan off guard. Yes, he admitted, sometimes desperately, but lonely is better than settling for something that doesn't work just because you don't want to be alone. Lauren nodded slowly. I think I settled with Tyler. Not in the beginning. In the beginning, it felt exciting and new. But somewhere along the way, it became comfortable instead of passionate, safe instead of thrilling. I convinced myself that's what adult relationships were supposed to be. Stable, predictable. There's nothing wrong with stable and predictable, Ethan said. Emma and I had that, and it was wonderful. But stable and predictable should be built on a foundation of passion and connection and genuine partnership, not just because it's easier than being alone. Is that what you're looking for when you're ready to date again? Ethan considered the question. I don't know if I even know anymore. I want someone who understands that Lily comes first, always. Someone who gets that I have responsibilities and commitments that aren't negotiable. But I also want someone who makes me feel alive again, who reminds me that I'm more than just a father and a CEO. Someone who sees me as Ethan, not as a widower or a single parent or a business prospect. That sounds like a pretty tall order. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just not ready to compromise on the important things anymore. I did that once, with that woman I dated, and it made both of us miserable. They fell into a comfortable silence, sipping their wine and watching the Chicago skyline through the windows. Ethan found himself relaxing in a way he rarely did around new people. There was something about the temporary nature of this encounter, the knowledge that they'd go their separate ways in the morning and likely never see each other again. That made honesty easier. No pretense, no games, just two people sharing their truths with someone who had no agenda. Can I ask you something personal? Lauren said eventually. You've already asked me plenty of personal questions tonight, Ethan said with a small smile. What's one more? Do you think you'll ever remarry? Or is Emma it for you? It was a question people rarely asked him directly, and Ethan appreciated the courage it took for Lauren to voice it. I don't know, he said honestly. I loved Emma completely. She was my best friend, my partner, the love of my life, and for a long time after she died, I couldn't imagine ever feeling that way about anyone else. But lately, he trailed off, trying to find the right words. Lately, I've started to think that maybe loving Emma the way I did doesn't mean I can't love someone else differently. Not as a replacement, but as something new. Does that make sense? It makes perfect sense, Lauren said softly. And I think Emma would want you to be happy. She would. She made me promise, actually, in the hospital, near the end. She made me promise that I'd find someone else eventually, that I wouldn't spend the rest of my life alone. She said Lily needed a mother figure, but more than that, I needed someone to share my life with. That's beautiful and heartbreaking. That pretty much sums up the whole experience. Ethan drained the last of his wine. What about you? Do you think you'll give Tyler another chance? No, Lauren said immediately, with more certainty than she'd shown all night. I can't trust him anymore. Even if he had some incredible explanation, even if it really was just one mistake, I'd spend the rest of our relationship wondering when it would happen again. That's no way to live. Good, Ethan said approvingly. You deserve better than someone who makes you question your own instincts. Lauren smiled at him, and for the first time since he'd walked into the room, the smile reached her eyes. Thank you. For what? For staying, for listening, for treating my pain like it matters even though we're complete strangers. Your pain does matter, Ethan said seriously. And you're not a stranger anymore. You're Lauren Hayes, senior marketing strategist, survivor of a terrible relationship, and quite possibly the most honest person I've talked to in months. She laughed at that. The alcohol probably helped with the honesty. Maybe, but I don't think so. Ethan glanced at his watch and was shocked to see it was nearly 2 a.m. They'd been talking for 5 hours. I should probably let you get some sleep. Probably, Lauren agreed, though she made no move to stand. Neither did Ethan, because despite the lateness of the hour and the strangeness of the situation, he wasn't ready for this conversation to end. He'd enjoyed talking with Lauren more than he'd enjoyed talking with anyone in a very long time. She was sharp and funny and deeply thoughtful, and there was a vulnerability in her that she tried to hide but that made her all the more interesting. Can I tell you something? Lauren said suddenly. Of course. When I first opened that door and saw you standing there, before I realized you weren't the man I'd hired, I thought to myself that you looked kind, like someone who would actually listen instead of just waiting for their turn to talk. She paused. I was right. I could say the same about you, Ethan replied. When you asked me to stay, I thought you looked lost, like you needed someone to remind you that you're stronger than you feel in this moment. He paused. I was right too. They looked at each other across the coffee table, and something passed between them. Not attraction exactly, though Ethan couldn't deny that Lauren was beautiful. It was more like recognition, like seeing something in another person that reflected something in yourself. I should get to my actual room, Ethan said reluctantly. My flight leaves at 7, and I've got that recital tomorrow. Lily's ballet recital, Lauren remembered. You can't miss it. Never have, never will. Ethan stood and Lauren rose with him. They walked to the door together, and he paused with his hand on the handle. Thank you for tonight, Lauren. I know this wasn't how you planned to spend your evening, but I'm glad I got the wrong room key. Me too, she said, and meant it. Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet, fishing out a business card. He hesitated for just a moment, then handed it to her. If you ever need to talk again, or if you're ever in New York, feel free to reach out. Lauren took the card, glancing at it briefly before looking back at him with surprise. You're a CEO? I am. Does that change things? No, it just explains the suit, she smiled, and the confidence. The confidence came from Emma, actually. She never let me second-guess myself. Ethan opened the door, then turned back one more time. You're going to be okay, Lauren. Better than okay. You're going to look back on this night and realize it was a turning point, not an ending. I hope you're right. I usually am. He grinned at her and she laughed. Good night, Ethan. Give Lily my best at her recital. I will. Good night, Lauren. He walked down the hallway toward the elevators, feeling oddly reluctant to leave. When he glanced back, Lauren was still standing in the doorway, watching him go. She raised one hand in a small wave, and he returned it before stepping into the elevator. As the doors slid closed, Ethan found himself thinking that this had been one of the strangest nights of his life, but also one of the best. There was something about Lauren Hayes that had gotten under his skin, and he suspected he'd be thinking about her for a long time to come. What he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that they'd be seeing each other again much sooner than either of them expected. Lauren woke the next morning with a pounding headache and the immediate crushing realization that last night had actually happened. She lay in the hotel bed for a long moment, staring at the ceiling and replaying every mortifying detail. She'd hired a male companion, or tried to. She'd poured her heart out to a complete stranger. She'd drunk an entire bottle of wine and shared her deepest insecurities with a man whose name she barely remembered. Ethan Cole. She sat up slowly, the room spinning slightly, and spotted his business card on the nightstand where she'd left it before finally collapsing into bed around 3 a.m. With shaking hands, she picked it up and read it properly for the first time. Her blood went cold. Ethan Cole, Chief Executive Officer, Cole Industries. Cole Industries, one of the largest private equity firms in the country. A company that had been featured in Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg. A company that managed billions of dollars in assets and had a hand in everything from tech startups to commercial real estate. Oh no, she whispered to the empty room. Oh no, no, no! The man she drunkenly confessed to last night wasn't just some random businessman. He was one of the most powerful CEOs in New York, and she'd told him about her cheating boyfriend, her desperate plan to hire a companion, her pathetic attempt to reclaim some control over her life. Lauren dropped her head into her hands and groaned. This was worse than she'd thought. So much worse. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She'd finally turned it back on, and she saw 17 missed calls from Tyler along with a string of increasingly desperate text messages. She scrolled through them with detached interest, reading his excuses and apologies like they belonged to someone else's life. The last message, sent at 1:47 a.m., read, "I know you're ignoring me and I deserve that. But please, Lauren, just give me 5 minutes to explain. What you saw wasn't what it looked like. I love you. Please." What it looked like. As if there was some alternate interpretation of finding him in bed with another woman. Lauren deleted the entire conversation thread, then blocked his number. Whatever Tyler had to say, she didn't want to hear it. Ethan had been right last night. If Tyler had been unhappy, if he'd wanted out, he should have been man enough to end things properly. The betrayal wasn't just the physical act. It was the months of lies that had led up to it. She hauled herself out of bed and into the shower, letting the hot water wash away the remnants of last night. When she emerged 20 minutes later, wrapped in the hotel's plush bathrobe, she felt almost human again. She ordered room service, coffee, lots of coffee, and something greasy that would soak up the alcohol still in her system, and sat down at the desk to check her work email. There were 3 messages from her boss, Patricia, marked urgent. Lauren's stomach dropped as she opened the first one. "Lauren, I need you to call me as soon as you get this. Something's come up regarding the Hendricks account. P." The second message was more detailed. "Lauren, the Hendricks meeting has been moved up to Monday morning. I need you in the office tomorrow at 8 a.m. to prep. This is critical. Call me." The third message, sent at midnight, simply said, "Where are you? I've been trying to reach you all evening. Call me immediately." Lauren glanced at the time, 7:30 a.m. Too early to call Patricia on a Friday morning, especially when she'd clearly been trying to reach Lauren about a work emergency, and Lauren had been too busy drowning her sorrows to notice. She was drafting an apologetic email when her phone rang. Patricia's name flashed across the screen. "Patricia," Lauren answered, trying to sound professional and alert instead of hungover and emotionally devastated. "I'm so sorry I missed your calls last night. I had a personal emergency and—" "Are you all right?" Patricia cut in, her tone sharp with concern. "When you didn't answer, I started to worry." "I'm fine. Well, not fine exactly, but I'm okay." "What's going on with Hendricks?" "They're moving up their decision timeline. Instead of choosing an agency next month, they want presentations from all the finalists on Monday, which means we have 3 days to prepare instead of 3 weeks. Lauren's headache intensified. The Hendricks account was the biggest pitch of the year, a national retail chain looking to completely rebrand their image for younger consumers. Landing them would mean a massive commission and serious recognition within the company. "I'll be in the office in an hour," she said immediately. "You're sure you're okay? You sound off." "Just a rough night. I'll explain later." Lauren paused. "Patricia, thank you for checking on me." "Of course. That's what I'm here for." Patricia's voice softened slightly. "Get some coffee in you and get to the office. We've got work to do." Lauren hung up and stared at her reflection in the mirror across the room. Her eyes were still puffy from crying, and she looked exhausted. But beneath the evidence of last night's breakdown, she could see something else. A determination that had been missing yesterday. Tyler's betrayal had gutted her, yes, but she was still here, still standing, still capable of doing her job and doing it well. She got dressed quickly in yesterday's clothes. The black dress felt ridiculous in the morning light, but it would have to do, and headed back to her apartment. The drive through Chicago's morning traffic gave her too much time to think, and her mind kept drifting back to Ethan. The way he'd listened without judgment, the way he'd shared his own pain so openly, the kindness in his eyes when he'd told her she was going to be okay. She wondered if he'd made his flight, if he was sitting in his daughter's ballet recital right now, watching Lily dance, if he'd thought about their conversation at all, or if he'd already dismissed it as a strange but forgettable encounter. Lauren pulled into her apartment building's parking garage and took a deep breath before heading upstairs. She half expected Tyler to be waiting outside her door, but the hallway was empty. Small mercies. Inside, her apartment looked exactly as she'd left it yesterday morning, before her world had imploded. The breakfast dishes were still in the sink. Her laptop was open on the coffee table, emails from work waiting to be answered. It was strange how a place could look exactly the same when everything had changed. She showered again, properly this time, and changed into work-appropriate clothes. Dark slacks, a crisp white blouse, the blazer that always made her feel confident and in control. As she applied makeup to hide the evidence of her tears, She thought about what Ethan had said about turning points. Maybe he was right. Maybe last night wasn't an ending, but the beginning of something better. Or maybe she was just trying to find meaning in a humiliating mistake. Either way, she had work to do. By the time Lauren arrived at Fulton and Cross's downtown offices, it was nearly 9:30. Patricia was already in the conference room, surrounded by presentation boards and sample campaigns, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she studied a spreadsheet. "There you are," Patricia said, looking up. "Coffee's fresh. Pour yourself a cup and sit down. We need to strategize." Lauren did as instructed, grateful for the normalcy of work, for having something concrete to focus on besides her demolished personal life. She settled into one of the leather chairs and pulled out her tablet. "Where do we stand?" "We're up against Morrison and Lee and the Collective. Both have strong creative teams and existing relationships with Hendrix's board." Patricia slid a folder across the table. "But we have something they don't, your consumer insight research from the Chicago market. If we can show them that we understand their target demographic better than anyone else, we've got a real shot." Lauren opened the folder and scanned the data she'd compiled over the past 3 months. Detailed surveys, focus groups, purchasing pattern analysis, all focused on the 18 to 35 age range Hendrix was trying to capture. It was solid work, some of the best she'd ever done, and seeing it laid out in black and white reminded her that she was good at her job. Really good. "We build the entire pitch around this data," Lauren said, her strategic mind clicking into gear. "We don't just tell them we can reach younger consumers. We show them exactly who those consumers are, what they want, what they respond to. We make it personal." "Exactly." Patricia smiled, the expression transforming her usually stern face. "This is why I promoted you, Lauren. You don't just think creatively, you think strategically." They worked through the morning and into the afternoon, breaking only for a quick lunch that neither of them really ate. Lauren found herself falling into the familiar rhythm of collaboration with Patricia, bouncing ideas back and forth, refining their approach, building something that felt genuinely innovative. For hours at a time, she forgot about Tyler entirely, forgot about the humiliation and hurt, forgot about everything except the work in front of her. It wasn't until Patricia called it a day around 7 that evening that reality came crashing back. "Go home," Patricia said firmly, packing up her laptop. "Get some real sleep. We'll hit this hard again tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow's Saturday," Lauren pointed out, "and our presentation is Monday morning, which means we work the weekend." Patricia gave her a searching look. "Unless you had other plans?" Lauren thought about her empty apartment, the blocked number on her phone, the hole in her life where Tyler used to be. "No plans," she said. "I'll be here at 8. "Make it 9. You look exhausted." Lauren drove home through the early evening traffic, her mind still half on the Hendrix campaign and half on the uncomfortable fact that she'd have to face her life eventually. She couldn't hide and work forever, no matter how appealing that option seemed. When she pulled into her parking space, she saw Tyler's car waiting near the building entrance. Her first instinct was to back out and drive away, to avoid this confrontation entirely, but that would only delay the inevitable. She'd have to face him eventually, and on her own terms was better than being ambushed later. She parked and got out of her car with her head held high. Tyler spotted her immediately and climbed out of his own vehicle, his expression a mixture of desperation and relief. "Lauren, thank God," he started, moving toward her. "I've been waiting for hours. You weren't answering your phone, and I blocked your number," she said evenly, keeping her distance. "What are you doing here, Tyler?" "I needed to talk to you, to explain." "There's nothing to explain. I saw what I saw." "It's not what you think." He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she'd once found endearing but now just found irritating. "Melissa means nothing to me. It was a mistake, one stupid mistake, and I swear it'll never happen again." "Melissa," Lauren repeated, tasting the name. "Is that her name? The woman you were sleeping with?" "I wasn't sleeping with her, not like—" "It only happened once, Lauren, I swear." "Once that I caught you. How many times before that?" Tyler's face flushed. "It was the first time. I swear on everything, it was the first time." "I don't believe you." The words came out calm and cold, and she watched something break in Tyler's expression. "Even if it was, even if last night really was the only time, you still made the choice. You still betrayed me, and I can't trust you anymore." I'll do anything to make this right, he pleaded. Counseling, whatever you want. Just please don't throw away 2 years because of one mistake. You threw away 2 years, Lauren corrected. I'm just acknowledging what you already destroyed. Lauren, I need you to leave, Tyler, and I need you to stop calling, stop texting, stop showing up at my apartment. We're done. Please. His voice cracked. I love you. If you loved me, you wouldn't have slept with someone else. Lauren pulled her keys from her purse. Goodbye, Tyler. She walked past him toward the building entrance, half expecting him to follow, to keep arguing. But when she glanced back, he was just standing by his car, looking defeated. For a brief moment, she felt a pang of sympathy. He looked genuinely devastated. Then she remembered the image of him in bed with Melissa, and the sympathy evaporated. Inside her apartment, Lauren finally let herself cry again. Not the desperate, broken sobs of last night, but quieter tears for the future she'd imagined and the relationship she'd invested in. She let herself grieve for what she'd lost, even if what she'd lost hadn't been real in the first place. When the tears finally stopped, she made herself dinner, pasta with the pesto she'd made last weekend, a lifetime ago when she'd been happy and ignorant. She ate mechanically, tasting nothing, and then crawled into bed even though it was barely 9 o'clock. Sleep didn't come easily. Her mind kept replaying the confrontation with Tyler, kept comparing his desperate excuses to Ethan's quiet honesty last night. Ethan, who'd lost the love of his life to cancer. Ethan, who understood real pain and real loss. Ethan, who'd listened to her problems without trying to fix them or minimize them. Ethan, who was probably back in New York right now, having completely forgotten about the stranger he'd comforted in a hotel room. Lauren pulled out his business card from her purse and studied it in the dim light from her bedside lamp. Cole Industries had offices in Manhattan, according to the address. She wondered what his life was like there, what kind of father he was to Lily, whether he'd ever actually meant it when he said she could reach out if she needed to talk. Probably not. It had been a polite gesture, nothing more. She tucked the card back into her wallet and turned off the light. The weekend passed in a blur of work. Lauren spent Saturday and Sunday at the office with Patricia and their creative team, refining the Hendrix presentation until it was as close to perfect as they could make it. The intensive focus was exactly what she needed. No time to think about Tyler, no time to wallow, just pure professional drive. By Sunday evening, they had something genuinely impressive. A multi-channel campaign that spoke directly to the demographic Hendrix wanted to reach, backed by Lauren's detailed research and brought to life by the creative team's brilliant execution. Patricia was practically glowing with confidence. They're going to love this, she said, reviewing the final presentation boards. Lauren, this research is gold, absolute gold. It's a team effort, Lauren demurred, but she couldn't help feeling proud. This was good work, career-making work, if they landed the account. Don't be modest. This pitch lives or dies on your consumer insights. Patricia closed her laptop decisively. Go home, get some sleep. Tomorrow morning we're going to walk into that conference room and blow their minds. Lauren did go home, but sleep was elusive. She kept running through the presentation in her mind, anticipating questions, rehearsing her portions. By the time her alarm went off Monday morning, she'd maybe slept 4 hours total. She dressed carefully in her best suit, navy blue, expertly tailored, paired with her lucky heels and the necklace her grandmother had given her when she graduated college. Professional, confident, ready. The presentation was scheduled for 10 o'clock at Hendrix headquarters in the Loop. Lauren and Patricia arrived 45 minutes early, along with their creative director Marcus and the junior designer who'd created the visual components. They set up in the sleek conference room, testing the projector and arranging their boards, making sure everything was perfect. At exactly 10, the Hendrix team filed in. Their CMO, their brand director, and 3 other executives Lauren recognized from preliminary meetings. Introductions were made, pleasantries exchanged. Then Patricia kicked off the presentation, her voice strong and assured. Thank you for having us today. We know you're seeing impressive work from several agencies, so we're going to get right to the point. Fulton & Cross doesn't just create campaigns, we create connections. And the connection you want to build is with a younger, more diverse consumer base that currently sees Hendrix as their parent store. Marcus took over, walking through the creative concepts, a bold, vibrant rebrand that maintained Hendrix's legacy while signaling a new direction. It was smart work, eye-catching, and strategic. Then it was Lauren's turn. She stepped forward, calling up her research data on the projector, and felt the familiar thrill of being in her element. This was where she excelled, translating raw data into compelling narrative, making numbers tell a story. We surveyed 5,000 consumers between ages 18 and 35 across 10 major markets, she began. And what we found challenges some conventional wisdom about this demographic. They're not rejecting traditional retail. They're rejecting being treated like a monolith. They want personalization. They want brands that understand their values. They want authenticity, not pandering. She walked them through the data, showing purchasing patterns, brand perception metrics, emotional response analysis. She watched the Hendrix executives lean forward, saw them taking notes, asked and answered their questions with confidence. This was why she'd worked so hard, sacrificed so much. This moment right here, where her expertise and preparation came together into something that mattered. The presentation lasted 90 minutes. When they finished, the Hendrix CMO was smiling. "That was exceptional," he said, shaking Patricia's hand. "Truly exceptional. You've given us a lot to think about." "We'll be making our final decision by end of week," the brand director added, turning to Lauren. "Your research was particularly impressive, Ms. Hayes. Very thorough." "Thank you," Lauren said, trying to keep her voice professional even as her heart raced with hope. They packed up their materials and headed back to the office, where Patricia immediately gathered the team for a debrief. "That went as well as it possibly could have," she announced. "I saw their faces. They loved the creative, but Lauren, your data sold them. I'm almost certain we're getting that account." "Don't jinx it," Marcus warned, but he was grinning. "I'm not jinxing anything. I'm being realistic." Patricia turned to Lauren. "Take the rest of the day off. You've earned it."
"Hell, you've earned the whole week off, but I can't afford to lose you right now." Lauren laughed, feeling lighter than she had in days. "I'll settle for the afternoon." She left the office just after noon, stepping out into a perfect October day. The sky was impossibly blue, the air crisp but not cold, the kind of day that made Chicago feel like the best city in the world. On impulse, she walked to Millennium Park instead of heading home, finding a bench near the Bean and just sitting, watching tourists take selfies and children chase pigeons. Her phone buzzed. For a brief, irrational moment, she thought it might be Tyler. But no, she'd blocked him. The message was from Cassie. "How are you holding up? Want to get dinner tonight?" Lauren smiled and typed back. "Dinner sounds perfect. I have news. Good news or bad news?" "Good news. Really good news. Thank God. I've been worried about you." 7 p.m. at Rosalie's? See you there." Lauren pocketed her phone and tilted her face up toward the sun, letting its warmth soak into her skin. She thought about Ethan's words from that strange night in the hotel. "You're going to look back on this night and realize it was a turning point, not an ending. Maybe he'd been right after all." That evening, she met Cassie at their favorite Italian restaurant in Wicker Park. Her best friend took one look at her and pulled her into a fierce hug. "You look better," Cassie declared, stepping back to examine her. "Tired, but better. More like yourself." "I feel better," Lauren admitted, following her to their usual table by the window. "Not great, but better." They ordered wine and appetizers, and Lauren filled her in on everything. The confrontation with Tyler, the weekend of intensive work, the successful Hendrix presentation that morning. "I'm so proud of you," Cassie said, raising her glass in a toast. "Most people would have fallen apart after what Tyler did. Instead, you killed it at work." "I didn't have much choice. Patricia needed me, and honestly, the distraction helped." "And Tyler? Are you really done with him?" "Completely." Lauren didn't even hesitate. "Whatever we had, he destroyed it. I can't go back to someone I don't trust." Cassie studied her for a moment. "You seem different, stronger somehow." Maybe I am." Lauren thought about the past 4 days, about the pain and humiliation and slow rebuild of her sense of self. Or maybe I'm just finally being honest about what I want instead of settling for what's comfortable. Which is? I don't know yet, but I know it's not Tyler. She paused. I think I need to be single for a while. Really single, not just between relationships. Figure out who I am on my own. I think that's wise, Cassie agreed. Then, with characteristic bluntness, what about Hotel Guy? Did you ever hear from him? Lauren felt her cheeks warm. His name is Ethan, and no. Why would I? He was just being kind. He gave you his business card. As a polite gesture, I'm sure he gives his card to people all the time. But did you look him up? When Lauren hesitated, Cassie's eyes widened. You did? What did you find? He's exactly who he said he was. CEO of Coal Industries, major private equity firm. Widower, single father, exactly as successful and accomplished as you'd expect someone in his position to be. Are you going to call him? No. Why would I call him? That would be incredibly inappropriate. Why? You had a connection. We had one honest conversation in unusual circumstances. That's not a connection. That's just two people being vulnerable at the right moment. Lauren shook her head. Besides, he lives in New York. He's got his own life, his daughter. I'm sure he's completely forgotten about that night. If you say so, Cassie said, but she was smiling in a way that made Lauren deeply suspicious. What? Nothing. Just that you've talked about him more in the last 5 minutes than you talked about Tyler in the last 5 months. That's not true. It absolutely is. With Tyler, everything was fine and good and going well. But when you talk about Ethan, this guy you spent one night with, your whole face lights up. It does not, Lauren protested, but she could feel the blush spreading. And I didn't spend the night with him. We just talked. Right. Just talked for 5 hours about deeply personal things. Cassie leaned forward. I'm not saying you should marry the guy, Lauren. I'm just saying maybe that connection meant something. Maybe it's worth exploring. There's nothing to explore. He's in New York with his daughter and his billion-dollar company.
I'm here trying to rebuild my life after my boyfriend cheated on me. That's the end of the story.
Okay, Cassie said easily, backing off. But if you do change your mind, you know where to find me. They moved on to other topics, Cassie's latest dating disaster, their college friend Sarah's upcoming wedding, plans for Thanksgiving. Normal, comfortable conversation that reminded Lauren why Cassie had been her best friend for over a decade. She was pushy and meddling sometimes, yes, but she also knew when to let things go. When Lauren got home that night, full of pasta and wine and feeling almost content, she found herself pulling out Ethan's business card one more time. She ran her thumb over the raised lettering of his name, remembering the way he'd looked at her with such understanding, the kindness in his voice when he told her she deserved better. Cassie was wrong. That night hadn't been the start of something. It had been exactly what it appeared to be. A moment of connection between two strangers who needed someone to listen. Nothing more. Lauren tucked the card back into her wallet and headed to bed. She didn't think about Ethan Cole again for the next 3 days. On Thursday afternoon, Patricia called Lauren into her office with a smile that could have lit up the entire building. We got it, she said simply. Hendricks just called. We got the account. Lauren felt joy surge through her, bright and pure and uncomplicated. Are you serious? Completely serious. They were unanimous. Said our presentation was exactly what they needed, and your research was the deciding factor. Patricia came around her desk and, to Lauren's surprise, pulled her into a hug. Congratulations, Lauren. This is huge for all of us, but especially for you. Thank you, Lauren managed, feeling tears prick her eyes. Happy tears this time. Thank you for trusting me with this. You earned it. Patricia released her and returned to her professional demeanor. Now here's where things get interesting. As of next Monday, Fulton & Cross is being acquired by a larger marketing consortium. It's been in the works for months, but we couldn't say anything until the deal closed. Lauren's stomach dropped. What does that mean for us? It means bigger resources, bigger clients, bigger opportunities. The parent company wants to keep our team intact. In fact, they're specifically interested in you. In me? They're looking for a senior strategic assistant to work directly with their executive team. It's a significant step up from your current role, both in terms of responsibility and compensation. Patricia slid a folder across her desk. They want to interview you tomorrow, actually, at their corporate headquarters. Lauren opened the folder with shaking hands, scanning the job description and nearly choking on the salary figure. This was more than a promotion. This was a completely different level of career opportunity. Where are their headquarters? She asked. New York City. Lauren's heart stopped. New York? The position would require relocation, yes. I know that's a big ask. But Lauren, this is the kind of opportunity that comes along maybe once in a career. You should at least hear them out. Lauren's mind was racing. Leave Chicago? Leave everything she knew? Start over in a new city? A week ago, the thought would have been impossible. But a week ago, she'd still had Tyler, had still been planning a future that involved staying in Chicago indefinitely. Now? Now she had nothing tying her here except her apartment and Cassie. I'll do the interview, she heard herself say. If they're serious about me, I'll do the interview. Patricia grinned. Good, because I already told them you would. Your flight leaves tomorrow morning at 9. Lauren spent that evening in a state of controlled chaos, pulling clothes from her closet and trying to assemble an interview outfit that screamed competent professional without looking like she was trying too hard. Cassie had insisted on coming over to help, which mostly meant she sat on Lauren's bed drinking wine and offering commentary. The gray suit, Cassie said definitively. With the silk blouse, professional but not boring. Are you sure? Maybe the black is safer. The black makes you look like you're going to a funeral. You want them to see you as confident and ready for New York, not like you're mourning your life in Chicago. Lauren held up both options, studying them critically. I can't believe this is happening. A week ago, I was planning my anniversary dinner with Tyler, and now I'm interviewing for a job in New York. A week ago, you were planning your anniversary dinner with a cheating scumbag, Cassie corrected. Now you're interviewing for your dream job. I'd say that's an upgrade. It's not my dream job. I don't even know what the job is, really. Patricia gave me the basic description, but corporate restructuring always means something different than what's on paper. So ask questions during the interview. Show them you're thinking critically about the position. Cassie took a sip of wine. Have you thought about what you'd actually do if they offer it to you? Lauren sank onto the bed beside her. I've thought about nothing else for the past 4 hours. On one hand, it's an incredible opportunity. On the other hand, it's terrifying. New city, new job, starting completely over. You'd have a built-in friend, at least. Who? Cassie gave her a meaningful look. A certain CEO who told you to reach out if you were ever in New York? Oh my God, not this again. Lauren threw a pillow at her. Ethan Cole is not a factor in this decision. I'm not even sure he'd remember me. He gave you his card. He gives everyone his card. That's what business people do. Keep telling yourself that. Cassie stood and pulled the gray suit from Lauren's hands, hanging it carefully on the closet door. This is the one. Pair it with your black heels, the ones with the red soles. Subtle power move. Those are my only designer shoes. I bought them for the Hendrix presentation. And they worked, didn't they? You got the account. Now use them to get the job. Cassie turned to face her, expression serious. Lauren, I know you're scared. Change is scary, especially after everything you've been through this week. But you're one of the strongest people I know. If anyone can walk into a New York office and absolutely kill an interview, it's you. Lauren felt tears prick her eyes. I'm going to miss you if I take this job. Mom, I'm going to miss you too, but I'll also be incredibly proud of you, and I'll visit constantly. I've always wanted an excuse to spend weekends in Manhattan. They hugged, and Lauren let herself feel the weight of what she was considering. Leaving Chicago meant leaving Cassie, leaving the city she'd lived in her entire adult life, leaving the comfortable familiarity of everything she knew. But staying meant staying in a place haunted by memories of Tyler, by the life she'd thought she was building that had turned out to be an illusion. Maybe starting over was exactly what she needed. The next morning, Lauren caught the early flight to LaGuardia. She'd been to New York once before, for a college trip, but that had been a whirlwind of tourist attractions and late nights in crowded bars. This was different. This was professional. This was her future, potentially. The corporate offices were in Midtown, a gleaming glass tower that made Chicago's skyline look modest by comparison. Lauren checked in with security, received a visitor's badge, and was directed to the 32nd floor. The elevator ride up gave her just enough time to run through her prepared answers one more time, to remind herself that she was qualified for this, that she deserved to be here. The elevator doors opened onto a reception area that was all modern elegance. White marble, minimalist furniture, tasteful artwork that probably cost more than Lauren's annual salary. A young woman with perfect hair and an even more perfect smile greeted her. Ms. Hayes, welcome. They're just wrapping up a meeting, but they'll be ready for you in a few minutes. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? Water would be great, thank you. Lauren accepted the bottle of imported sparkling water and took a seat in one of the pristine white chairs, trying not to let her nerves show. She pulled out her portfolio, checking one more time that she had everything she needed: copies of her resume, samples of her work, the Hendricks presentation data. A door opened down the hall, and she heard voices. A man and woman discussing quarterly projections. The woman appeared first, shaking hands with someone still in the office, before turning toward the reception area. She was probably in her 50s, impeccably dressed in a designer suit, with the kind of presence that commanded attention. "Ms. Hayes," she extended her hand. "I'm Victoria Chen, Chief Marketing Officer. Thank you so much for flying out on such short notice." "Thank you for the opportunity," Lauren said, standing to shake her hand and hoping her palm wasn't too sweaty. "We're very impressed with your work on the Hendricks account. Patricia speaks very highly of you." Victoria gestured down the hallway. "Let's head to the conference room. Our CEO is running a few minutes behind, but he'll join us shortly." They walked past several offices, and Lauren couldn't help but notice the caliber of everything around her. The artwork, the view of Manhattan spreading out below them, the quiet hum of serious business being conducted. This was a different league than Fulton and Cross, and the realization was both thrilling and intimidating. The conference room was smaller than she'd expected, more intimate. A long table with 8 chairs, windows overlooking the city, a presentation screen on one wall. Victoria directed Lauren to a seat and settled across from her, pulling out a tablet. "So," Victoria began with a warm smile, "tell me what appeals to you about this position." Lauren had rehearsed this answer, but now that the moment had arrived, the prepared speech felt hollow. Instead, she decided to be honest. "I'll be completely candid with you. Until yesterday afternoon, I didn't know this position existed. But from what Patricia told me and what I've researched since, it sounds like exactly the kind of challenge I'm looking for. I've spent the past 5 years building expertise in consumer analytics and strategic marketing. I'm ready to apply that expertise at a higher level, working with multiple brands and helping shape broader strategic decisions." "And you're comfortable with the idea of relocating to New York?" "I am," Lauren said, surprising herself with how easily the words came. "I've lived in Chicago my whole life, and I love it. But I'm at a point where I'm ready for something new, something that pushes me outside my comfort zone." Victoria nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the kind of attitude we're looking for. This role isn't just about executing marketing strategies. It's about advising our executive team on how to position our portfolio companies for maximum growth. It requires someone who can think strategically, communicate clearly, and isn't afraid to challenge assumptions." "That sounds like something I'd excel at," Lauren said confidently. They talked through her background, her experience, her approach to consumer research and data analysis. Lauren found herself relaxing into the conversation, enjoying the back and forth with someone who clearly understood and valued the kind of work she did. Victoria was sharp, asking probing questions that made Lauren think, but she was also encouraging, nodding appreciatively when Lauren made a particularly good point. 20 minutes into the interview, there was a knock at the conference room door. "Come in," Victoria called. The door opened and Lauren's entire world tilted on its axis. Ethan Cole walked into the room, his attention on the file in his hands, already speaking. "Victoria, I'm sorry I'm late. The Mercer call went longer than—" He looked up and stopped mid-sentence, his eyes locking with Lauren's. For a moment, nobody moved. Lauren felt her face flush hot, felt her heart start to pound so hard she was certain everyone in the room could hear it. This couldn't be happening. This absolutely could not be happening. Ethan's expression shifted through surprise, recognition, and something else she couldn't quite identify before settling into professional neutrality. "Ms. Hayes," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "It's good to see you again." "You two know each other?" Victoria looked between them with interest. "We met briefly in Chicago last week," Ethan said smoothly, moving to take the seat at the head of the table. "A chance encounter. I had no idea you were the candidate Patricia recommended." Lauren found her voice, though it came out slightly higher than normal. "I had no idea this was your company, Mr. Cole." The formality felt absurd given the intimacy of their last conversation, but what else could she do? Tell Victoria they'd spent 5 hours in a hotel room talking about their deepest wounds? That she'd initially thought he was a hired companion? That she'd cried on him about her cheating boyfriend? "Small world," Victoria said lightly, though her expression suggested she sensed there was more to the story. "Well, this should make the interview more comfortable, at least. Ethan, I've been asking Ms. Hayes about her background and her approach to strategic marketing. Her work on the Hendricks account was exceptional. Ethan set down the file and gave Lauren his full attention, and she felt pinned by that blue gaze. I'd love to hear more about that. Patricia sent over some of your research data, but I'd like to hear your process in your own words. This was a test, Lauren realized, not just of her professional qualifications, but of whether she could handle the awkwardness of this situation with grace, whether she could separate their personal encounter from this professional context. She could. She had to. The Hendricks project started with a fundamental question, she began, forcing her voice steady and professional. They wanted to reach younger consumers, but their previous campaigns had failed because they were based on assumptions rather than actual data. So I designed a comprehensive survey targeting 18 to 35-year-olds across 10 major markets, focusing not just on purchasing habits, but on emotional connections to brands. She walked them through her methodology, the insights she'd uncovered, how those insights had shaped the creative campaign. She was careful to maintain eye contact with both Victoria and Ethan to treat him exactly as she would any other CEO interviewing her for a position. If he could be professional about this, so could she. But it was hard. Every time she looked at him, she remembered his kindness in that hotel room, the way he'd listened without judgment, the understanding in his eyes when she'd confessed her humiliation. This polished, powerful CEO was the same man who'd sat with a stranger and shared his grief about losing his wife. Impressive, Victoria said when Lauren finished. The level of detail in your research is exactly what we need for this role. We're not just looking for someone who can execute strategy. We need someone who can build it from the ground up. That's what I do best, Lauren said. Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her. Ms. Hayes, I have a question. This position would require you to challenge our assumptions sometimes, to push back when you think we're headed in the wrong direction. Are you comfortable doing that with senior leadership? It was a loaded question, and they both knew it. Was she comfortable being honest with him, even when it was difficult? Could she maintain professional boundaries while still being effective? I'm very comfortable advocating for what I believe is the right strategic approach, Lauren said carefully. I think the best teams are built on honest communication and mutual respect. If I have data that suggests a different direction, I'd present that data clearly and explain my reasoning. But ultimately, I understand that leadership makes the final decisions, and I'd support those decisions even if they differ from my recommendations. Good answer, Victoria said approvingly. Ethan nodded slowly. One more question. Why should we hire you specifically? We have several other qualified candidates interviewing for this role. Lauren met his gaze directly. Because I don't just bring expertise, I bring perspective. I've worked my way up from entry-level positions, so I understand every aspect of the marketing pipeline. I've succeeded in a competitive market with limited resources, so I know how to be strategic and creative simultaneously. And I'm at a point in my life where I'm ready to fully commit to the next level of my career without distractions or divided attention. The last part was pointed, and she saw the flash of understanding in Ethan's eyes. She was telling him she was past Tyler, past the heartbreak, focused entirely on moving forward. Thank you, Ms. Hayes, Victoria said, standing. That was an excellent interview. We have 2 more candidates to see this afternoon, but we'll make our decision quickly. You should hear from us within 48 hours. Lauren stood as well, shaking Victoria's hand first, then Ethan's. His grip was firm, professional, but she felt the slight squeeze of acknowledgement. It was good to see you again, Lauren, he said quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. I hope everything worked out with your situation. It did, she replied, matching his tone. Thank you for your advice. It was helpful. Victoria walked her to the elevator, chatting about New York and offering recommendations for lunch spots if Lauren had time before her flight back. Lauren nodded and smiled and said all the right things, but her mind was reeling. Ethan Cole was the CEO of the company offering her this position. The man she'd poured her heart out to in a Chicago hotel room was potentially about to become her boss. This was impossible. This was insane. This was her life, apparently. She made it to the elevator, down to the lobby, out onto the Manhattan street before she let herself fully process what had just happened. The November air was cold against her flushed face as she walked aimlessly for several blocks, trying to sort through the chaos in her head. Should she withdraw her candidacy? Was it even appropriate to work for someone who knew so much about her personal life? Would Ethan even offer her the job, given the awkwardness of their prior meeting?
Her phone buzzed. A text from Cassie. How did it go? Lauren stared at the message, trying to figure out how to even begin explaining. Finally, she typed back. Call you from the airport. You're not going to believe this. She found a coffee shop and ordered something strong and sweet, then called her airline to change her flight too later that evening. She needed time to think, time to process, time to figure out what the hell she was supposed to do now. Her coffee arrived, and she wrapped her hands around the warm cup, staring out at the Manhattan street scene. Professionals rushing past in expensive coats, taxis honking, street vendors selling pretzels and hot dogs. This could be her life if she took the job. This city, this energy, this completely new start. But working for Ethan? Her phone buzzed again, and this time it was an unknown New York number. Her heart jumped as she answered. Ms. Hayes, this is Jennifer from Mr. Cole's office. He asked me to reach out and see if you were still in the city. Lauren's mouth went dry. I am. My flight isn't until this evening. Would you be available to meet with Mr. Cole privately? He has an opening at 4 o'clock if that works for you. This was either very good or very bad. Yes, that works. Excellent. I'll text you the address. It's a coffee shop near the office, something a bit more casual than the formal interview. The text came through a moment later with an address 3 blocks from where Lauren was currently sitting. She had 2 hours to prepare, to figure out what Ethan wanted to say to her privately, to decide how she was going to handle this impossible situation. At 3:55, Lauren walked into the coffee shop, a small independent place with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. Ethan was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee in front of him. He'd loosened his tie and removed his suit jacket, looking more like the man she'd met in Chicago than the powerful CEO from the interview. Hi, he said as she approached, standing to pull out her chair. I hope you don't mind that I ordered for you. I remembered you mentioned liking lattes. I did say that, didn't I? Lauren sat down, accepting the coffee. Thank you. They were quiet for a moment, and the silence felt heavy with everything they weren't saying. Finally, Ethan spoke. I need to apologize. I had no idea you were interviewing for the position at my company. If I had known, I would have... He stopped, seeming unsure how to finish the sentence. You would have what? Recused yourself from the interview? Told them not to consider me? Honestly, I don't know. This is an unprecedented situation for me. He ran his hand through his hair, the gesture achingly familiar from that night in Chicago. What I do know is that our prior meeting shouldn't affect your candidacy one way or another. You're clearly qualified for the position. Victoria was extremely impressed, and your work speaks for itself. But, Lauren prompted, because she could hear the unspoken reservation in his voice. But I also want to make sure you're comfortable with the situation. If you'd rather withdraw your application because of our previous encounter, I'd completely understand. No judgment, no hard feelings. Lauren took a sip of her coffee, buying time to organize her thoughts. Can I be completely honest with you? I'd prefer it, actually. When I walked into that conference room and saw you, I wanted to die of embarrassment. Everything I told you that night in Chicago, all the personal details about my life and my relationship and my poor decision-making, the thought of you knowing all that while interviewing me was mortifying. Ethan nodded slowly. I can understand that. But then we started talking about the work, and I realized something. You didn't treat me any differently because of what you knew. You asked the same questions Victoria asked, held me to the same standards, evaluated me based on my qualifications. And that made me realize that maybe our prior meeting doesn't have to define our professional relationship. It doesn't, Ethan agreed. What you told me that night was in confidence during a difficult moment in your life. That information doesn't leave that hotel room, metaphorically speaking. If you come work for us, you'd be starting with a clean slate. Would I be working directly with you? You'd be reporting to Victoria primarily, but yes, we'd interact regularly, strategic planning meetings, quarterly reviews, that sort of thing. He paused. If that makes you uncomfortable, I can arrange for... It doesn't, Lauren interrupted. Or at least I don't think it should. We're both adults. We can be professional about this. We can, Ethan confirmed. The question is whether you actually want the job, not just whether you can handle the awkwardness of working with me. Lauren considered this. When I flew out here this morning, I wasn't sure what I wanted. This whole week has been so chaotic and overwhelming that I haven't had time to really think about my future beyond just getting through each day. But sitting in that interview, talking about strategic planning and data analysis and the kind of work I could do at this level, I realized I do want it. I want the challenge. I want the opportunity. I want the chance to prove what I'm capable of. Then you should have it, Ethan said simply. Are you offering me the job? Not yet. Victoria and I need to confer, and we do have other candidates to consider. But I want you to know that our prior meeting won't count against you in any way. If anything, it gave me insight into your character, your honesty, your resilience, your willingness to be vulnerable when necessary. Those are all qualities I value in the people I work with. Lauren felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she hadn't fully realized she was carrying. Thank you. That means a lot. Of course. Ethan took a drink of his coffee. How have you been, by the way? Since that night? Better. I ended things with Tyler completely, threw myself into work, landed the Hendricks account, which is actually what led to this interview opportunity. She smiled slightly. You were right, about that night being a turning point rather than an ending. I'm glad to hear it. You deserve better than someone who would betray your trust like that. How's Lily? Did her recital go well? Ethan's whole face lit up. She was incredible. Didn't miss a single step, even when the kid next to her went the wrong direction. She's convinced she's going to be a principal dancer at New York City Ballet now. At 7, anything is possible. That's what I told her. His expression turned thoughtful. She's actually part of why I wanted to talk to you privately. If you do take this position, if you do move to New York, I want you to know that I take work-life balance very seriously, especially for my team. I have a daughter to get home to, and I expect my employees to have lives outside the office too. We work hard, but we also respect boundaries. That's good to know. My previous firm wasn't always great about that. It's something I learned the hard way after Emma died. I was so focused on work as a way to avoid grief that I almost missed Lily's entire kindergarten year. My mother-in-law finally sat me down and told me that Emma wouldn't want me to hide from our daughter. He smiled sadly. She was right. So now I make it a priority. Home for dinner most nights. No meetings after 5 unless absolutely critical. Weekends are sacred unless there's a genuine emergency. That must be difficult, balancing a company this size with being a single parent. It is, but it's also what keeps me grounded. Lily doesn't care about quarterly earnings or stock prices. She cares that I show up to her recitals and help with her homework and make her pancakes on Saturday mornings. Lauren found herself smiling at the image. You make pancakes? Terrible pancakes. Lily says they taste like cardboard, but she eats them anyway because apparently the chocolate chips make up for my lack of culinary skill. Chocolate chip pancakes sound perfect, actually. They fell into comfortable conversation after that, the professional pretense fading as they talked about New York versus Chicago, about adjusting to new cities, about the challenges and rewards of taking big career risks. Lauren found herself relaxing completely, remembering why she'd felt so comfortable talking to Ethan in the first place. He listened more than he spoke, asked thoughtful questions, made her feel like her perspective mattered. When they finally stood to leave an hour later, the awkwardness from the interview had completely dissipated. Thank you for this, Lauren said as they walked out onto the darkening street, for clearing the air and for being so professional about everything. Thank you for being willing to have the conversation. A lot of people would have just withdrawn their application to avoid the awkwardness. I'm trying to be braver these days, Lauren admitted, less worried about what's comfortable and more focused on what's right. That's a good philosophy. Ethan extended his hand and Lauren shook it. You'll hear from us soon, Lauren, and regardless of how the decision goes, I'm glad we ran into each other again. Me too, she said, and meant it. She caught a cab to LaGuardia and spent the flight back to Chicago, alternating between reviewing her interview notes and staring out at the clouds, trying to imagine what her life would look like if she actually got the job. New apartment in Manhattan, new colleagues, new routines, walking distance to museums and theaters and restaurants she'd only read about. A position that would challenge her and push her to grow in ways she'd never been pushed before. And Ethan Cole as her CEO, someone who already knew her secrets and had proven he could be trusted with them. It should have felt impossible, overwhelming. Instead, it felt like possibility. Cassie was waiting at her apartment when she got home, armed with Thai takeout and an expression of intense curiosity. Okay, she said the moment Lauren walked through the door. Spill.
What happened that you couldn't tell me over the phone? Lauren dropped her bag and collapsed onto the couch. Remember Ethan? Hotel guy from last week? Obviously. He's the CEO of the company I interviewed with today. Cassie's eyes went wide. What? I walked into the conference room and there he was. The man I spent 5 hours crying to about my failed relationship is potentially about to be my boss. Oh my God. Cassie sat down hard on the coffee table. What did you do? I interviewed anyway.
What else could I do? And then afterward, he asked to meet me privately to make sure I was comfortable with the situation. And are you? Lauren thought about the coffee shop conversation, about Ethan's professionalism mixed with genuine concern for her comfort. Yeah, actually, I think I am. He made it clear that what I told him that night stays confidential, that he'd evaluate me purely on my professional qualifications. And honestly, Cass, the job is incredible. It's everything I didn't even know I wanted. So you're going to take it if they offer? I think so. Yes, I think I'm going to take it. Cassie studied her for a long moment, then smiled. Good. You deserve this, Lauren. All of it. The fresh start, the amazing job, the hot CEO boss. He's not my hot CEO boss. He's just my potential boss who happens to also be the person I accidentally trauma dumped on in a hotel room. Right. Keep telling yourself that's all it is. What's that supposed to mean? It means the way your face changes when you talk about him suggests this is more than just a professional relationship, whether you want to admit it or not. Lauren threw a pillow at her. You're reading too much into this. I'm grateful to him for being kind to me when I was at my lowest point. That doesn't mean I have feelings for him. Okay, Cassie said in a tone that made it clear she didn't believe that for a second. But for the record, if you did have feelings for him, that would be completely understandable. He sounds like a genuinely good person, which is apparently rare enough to be notable. Can we please just eat our Thai food and talk about literally anything else? Fine. But when you move to New York and end up falling for your handsome widower CEO boss, I'm going to say I told you so. Noted. Now pass me the pad Thai. They spent the rest of the evening watching terrible reality TV and eating too much food, and Lauren let herself relax into the familiar comfort of her best friend's company. Whatever happened with the job, whatever complicated feelings she might or might not have about Ethan Cole, she had this. She had Cassie's friendship and support, and that was worth everything. Her phone rang just as Cassie was leaving around 11. A known New York number. This is Lauren, she answered, her heart suddenly pounding. Ms. Hayes, this is Victoria Chen. I hope I'm not calling too late. Not at all. Is everything okay? Everything is excellent, actually. I wanted to let you know that we've made our decision. The position is yours if you want it. Lauren felt the world tilt, felt everything change in an instant. Really? Really? You were exactly what we were looking for. Qualified, strategic, and not intimidated by the scope of the role. Plus, Ethan speaks very highly of you. He does? He said you were one of the most honest people he'd met in months, and that honesty combined with your analytical skills would make you invaluable to our team. Victoria paused. So what do you say, Lauren? Are you ready to join us? Lauren looked around her Chicago apartment, at the life she'd built here, at everything familiar and comfortable and safe. Then she thought about the view from that Manhattan conference room, about the challenge of the work, about the possibility of becoming someone new in a city that didn't know her as Tyler's ex-girlfriend or the girl who got cheated on. She thought about Ethan's words from that hotel room. This is a turning point, not an ending. Yes, she said, her voice strong and certain. Yes, I'm ready. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of logistics and goodbyes. Lauren gave notice at her Chicago apartment, sorted through years of accumulated belongings, and tried not to think too hard about the magnitude of what she was doing. Patricia threw her a farewell party at the office, complete with champagne and a cake decorated with a tiny skyline of Manhattan. Her team presented her with a leather portfolio embossed with her initials, and more than one person told her they were jealous of her courage. You're going to kill it in New York, Marcus said, raising his glass in a toast. And when you're running that company in 5 years, remember us little people. I'm going to be a senior assistant, not the CEO, Lauren laughed, but the warmth of their support settled around her like a blanket. Cassie helped her pack, which mostly involved drinking wine and arguing about what Lauren should keep versus donate. They were going through her closet when Cassie pulled out a sleek black dress and held it up with a knowing smile. "This the one you wore that night? Hotel night?" Lauren snatched it away. "I'm donating that. Too many complicated memories. Or you could keep it and wear it to your first company party in New York. Remind Ethan of where you started."
That would be incredibly inappropriate. Okay, but would it be hot? Cassie. Lauren tried to sound stern but ended up laughing. "I'm moving to New York for a job, not to pursue some fantasy relationship with my boss." Who said anything about pursuing? I'm just saying, if something were to happen naturally. Cassie waggled her eyebrows suggestively. Nothing is going to happen.
Ethan is a professional, I'm a professional, and we're going to maintain a completely appropriate working relationship. Right. And I'm sure he asked to meet you privately at that coffee shop purely for professional reasons. Lauren threw a sweater at her. He was being considerate about a potentially awkward situation. That's what good managers do. Good managers are men who are interested in more than just your analytical skills. I'm not having this conversation again. Lauren turned back to the closet, pulling out another armful of clothes. Besides, even if there was some kind of attraction, which there isn't, he's my boss. It would be completely unethical. People date their bosses all the time. Those people are making poor professional choices. Cassie was quiet for a moment, then said more seriously, "I just want you to be open to possibilities, Lauren. You've spent so long being careful and controlled, making all the right choices. And where did that get you? Cheated on by a man who didn't deserve you. Maybe it's time to take some risks. Let yourself feel something without overthinking it." Lauren sat down on the bed, surrounded by piles of clothes and half-packed boxes. "What if I'm not ready? Tyler and I broke up less than a month ago. Isn't it too soon to even think about someone else?" "You're not thinking about Tyler, though. You're thinking about Ethan. That tells me you're more over your ex than you realize. Or it tells me I'm rebounding in a spectacularly inappropriate direction. Maybe. But maybe the heart knows what it needs better than the head does." Cassie sat down beside her. "I'm not saying you should march into Ethan's office on your first day and confess your feelings. I'm just saying don't close yourself off to the possibility of something real because you're scared of breaking some unwritten rule about workplace relationships." Lauren thought about Ethan, the way he'd looked at her in that hotel room with such understanding, the care he'd taken to make sure she was comfortable during the interview process, the brief moments in the coffee shop when she'd seen beneath the CEO exterior to the grieving widower and devoted father underneath. She couldn't deny there was something there, some connection that felt significant. But whether that connection was appropriate to explore was another question entirely. "I'll stay open to possibilities," she said finally, "but I'm also going to be smart about this. The job comes first. Everything else is secondary." "That's all I ask," Cassie said, squeezing her hand. "Now, are you keeping this dress or not?" Lauren looked at the black dress, remembering how devastated she'd felt wearing it, how certain she'd been that her life was falling apart. So much had changed since then. "I'll keep it," she decided, "but not for Ethan, for me. As a reminder of how far I've come. Whatever helps you sleep at night," Cassie said with a grin. Her last night in Chicago was bittersweet. Cassie insisted on one final dinner at their favorite restaurant, the same Italian place where they'd had that fateful conversation about taking back control. They ordered too much food and split a bottle of wine, reminiscing about college adventures and early career disasters and all the moments that had shaped their friendship. "Promise me you'll visit," Cassie said as they waited for dessert. "Like, actually visit, not just say you will and then get too busy with your fancy New York life." "I promise. And you have to come see me. I want you to meet my new team, see my new apartment, experience New York the way locals do instead of just Times Square and the Statue of Liberty." "Deal." Cassie raised her glass. "To new beginnings and old friendships." "To new beginnings and old friendships," Lauren echoed, clinking glasses. The drive to New York took 12 hours, not including stops. Lauren had hired movers for her furniture, but she'd insisted on driving herself, wanting the time alone to process the transition. She left Chicago before dawn, watching the city lights fade in her rearview mirror as she headed east. The miles passed in a meditation of highway and rest stops and changing landscapes. Lauren had made a playlist for the drive, upbeat songs about fresh starts and taking chances, mixed with quieter tracks for when she needed to think. Somewhere in Pennsylvania, she found herself crying, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming weight of everything changing. By the time she crossed into New Jersey, though, the tears had dried and left behind something that felt like anticipation. Her new apartment was in the Upper West Side, a one-bedroom in a pre-war building that cost nearly double what she'd been paying in Chicago for half the space. But it had hardwood floors and a working fireplace and windows that overlooked a tree-lined street, and when she'd toured it via video call, she'd immediately known it was right. The moving truck was already there when she arrived, and she spent the next several hours directing furniture placement and unpacking boxes. By evening, she had something that almost resembled a home: bed assembled, kitchen functional, bathroom stocked. She ordered Chinese takeout from a place down the block and ate it sitting on her new couch, looking out at the Manhattan skyline just visible between the buildings across the street. This was real. This was happening. This was her life now. Her phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Welcome to New York. Looking forward to seeing you Monday morning. Don't forget, orientation starts at 9 a.m. sharp. Dress code is business professional for the first week. Then you can settle into our business casual norm." Lauren smiled and typed back a quick thank you, then scrolled through her other messages. Cassie checking that she'd arrived safely, Patricia wishing her luck, her mother, who'd been skeptical about the move but was trying to be supportive, sending a string of heart emojis. No message from Ethan, but she hadn't really expected one. He was her boss now, not her friend. Whatever connection they'd shared in Chicago was firmly in the past, compartmentalized as a strange but meaningful encounter that had helped her during a difficult time. She repeated that to herself like a mantra as she got ready for bed in her new apartment, in her new city, preparing for her new life. Monday morning arrived too quickly. Lauren had barely slept, too keyed up with nervous energy to relax. She dressed in her best suit, the navy one that had served her so well during the interview, and took extra care with her makeup and hair. First impressions mattered, even if she'd already technically made a first impression during the interview. The subway ride to Midtown was packed with Monday morning commuters, and Lauren found herself pressed against strangers in a way that felt both overwhelming and oddly exhilarating. This was New York. This was the rhythm of life here, and she was part of it now. She arrived at the office 15 minutes early, checked in with security, and took the elevator to the 32nd floor. The same receptionist from her interview greeted her warmly. "Miss Hayes, welcome to your first day. Victoria is in a meeting, but she left instructions for me to get you settled. I'll show you to your office and get you set up with IT."
My office?
Lauren had expected a cubicle, maybe a desk and a shared workspace. "Of course, all senior strategic assistants have private offices. Yours is just down this hallway." The office was small but well appointed. Glass walls that could be frosted for privacy, a proper desk with dual monitors, a small conference table for meetings. Windows overlooked the city, and Lauren could see the tip of the Chrysler Building in the distance. "This is incredible," she breathed. "We want our team to feel valued," the receptionist said. "IT will be by within the hour to set up your computer access. In the meantime, here's your orientation packet. It has all the basics: building access, benefits information, org charts, that sort of thing." Lauren spent the next hour going through the packet and trying to wrap her mind around the scope of her new role. She'd be working across 6 different portfolio companies, providing strategic marketing guidance and consumer insights. It was more responsibility than she'd ever had, and the thought was equally thrilling and terrifying. At exactly 9 o'clock, Victoria appeared at her door. "Good morning. Ready for your official orientation?" Lauren grabbed her notebook and followed Victoria to a larger conference room where 3 other new hires were already waiting, 2 men and a woman, all looking just as nervous as Lauren felt. Victoria launched into a comprehensive overview of the company, its history, its portfolio, and its culture. She was an engaging speaker, mixing facts and figures with personal anecdotes that made the corporate structure feel more human. "We work hard here," Victoria said, "but we also believe in balance. Our CEO has made that a priority since taking over 5 years ago. He's a single father, and he's been very clear that family obligations are not just accepted, but encouraged. We want people who bring their whole selves to work, not just their productivity." One of the other new hires, a young man who introduced himself as David, raised his hand. "Will we be meeting the CEO today?" "He's planning to stop by this afternoon, actually. He tries to meet all new hires within their first week. Very hands-on leadership style. Lauren felt her stomach flutter. She'd known she'd see Ethan eventually, but she hadn't expected it to be on her first day. She'd hoped for more time to establish herself in the role, to prove her competence before having to navigate the complexity of their prior relationship. The morning continued with tours of the office, introductions to various team members, and a lengthy session with IT to set up all her accounts and access. By lunchtime, Lauren's head was spinning with information. Victoria suggested they all grab lunch together in the building's cafeteria, and Lauren found herself sitting with her fellow new hires, trading stories about what had brought them to New York. David was fresh out of a top MBA program, eager and ambitious. The woman, Marie, had transferred from the company's London office and was adjusting to American corporate culture. The other man, James, was a career switcher from finance who wanted to get into the strategic side of business. "What about you?" Marie asked Lauren. "What's your story?" Lauren considered how much to share. "I was working in marketing at a firm in Chicago. Got recruited after landing a major account. It seemed like the right time for a change." "Do you know anyone in New York?" "Not really. Starting completely fresh." "That's brave," David said admiringly. "I'm from New Jersey, so New York isn't quite as big a leap for me." They were finishing lunch when Lauren felt a presence behind her. She turned and found herself looking up at Ethan Cole. "Sorry to interrupt," he said smoothly, addressing the whole table. "I wanted to welcome our new team members. I'm Ethan Cole." The other three immediately straightened, clearly starstruck. David actually stood up to shake Ethan's hand, introducing himself with an enthusiasm that bordered on obsequious. Marie and James followed suit, and then Ethan's eyes landed on Lauren. "Ms. Hayes," he said, extending his hand. "Good to see you again. I trust your move went smoothly?" "Very smoothly, thank you," Lauren replied, shaking his hand and trying to ignore the flutter in her chest at the contact. "The orientation this morning was excellent. Victoria does good work." He released her hand and addressed the group again. "I know orientation can be overwhelming, so I won't keep you. But I did want to say that my door is always open if you have questions or concerns. We're a collaborative environment here, and I value input from all levels of the organization." "That's great to hear, sir," David said earnestly. "Please, call me Ethan. We're not formal here." He smiled, and Lauren saw her fellow new hires visibly relax. Ethan had that effect on people, an ability to project authority while remaining approachable. "Enjoy the rest of your first day. Victoria will take good care of you." He left, and David let out a low whistle. "He's younger than I expected, and way more down to earth." "I heard he took over after his wife died," Marie said quietly. "Supposedly he was devastated but threw himself into the company and turned it around completely." "That's quite a story," James said, glancing at Lauren. "Did you know about that when you interviewed?" Lauren kept her expression neutral. "I knew some of his background, yes. It's impressive what he's built here." They returned to the orientation schedule, but Lauren's mind was partly elsewhere, replaying the brief interaction with Ethan. He'd been perfectly professional, treated her exactly the same as the other new hires, which was exactly what should happen, and exactly what she'd told herself she wanted. So why did she feel slightly disappointed? The afternoon brought meetings with her direct team members and a deep dive into the current projects she'd be supporting. Lauren met her fellow strategic assistants, a sharp woman named Rachel, who'd been with the company for 3 years, and a quiet man named Tom, who specialized in consumer behavior analysis. Both were welcoming and seemed genuinely happy to have another person joining the team. "You're going to love working here," Rachel said as she showed Lauren some of the analytics tools they used. "It's demanding, but Victoria is an excellent mentor, and Ethan actually listens when we present insights. I've worked places where leadership just wanted yes men, but here they really do want strategic thinking." "That's refreshing," Lauren said, making notes in her notebook. "It is. And honestly, Ethan sets the tone. He's brilliant, but not arrogant about it, if that makes sense. He'll challenge your assumptions and push you to think deeper, but he's never condescending." Lauren found herself wanting to know more, to understand what Ethan was like as a boss beyond the brief glimpses she'd had. "What's his leadership style like in practice?" "Direct but fair. He has very high standards, but he also gives you the autonomy to meet them in your own way. And like Victoria mentioned, he's serious about work-life balance. He's usually in early, but almost always leaves by 5:30 to have dinner with his daughter."
Rachel smiled. Sometimes he brings her to the office on snow days or school holidays. She's adorable, sits in his office doing homework while he takes calls. The image of Ethan as a hands-on father, balancing corporate leadership with parenting, made Lauren's chest feel warm. It matched everything he'd told her in Chicago, and knowing he actually lived those values made her respect him even more. Her first day ended at 6, and Lauren was exhausted but satisfied. She'd absorbed an overwhelming amount of information, met dozens of new colleagues, and started to understand the scope of her new role. More importantly, she'd made it through seeing Ethan without any awkwardness, without their past interfering with their professional relationship. She was gathering her things when Victoria appeared at her office door. "How was your first day?" "Intense, but good," Lauren said honestly. "There's a lot to learn, but I'm excited about the challenge." "You're going to do great. I can tell." Victoria leaned against the doorframe. "I wanted to give you a heads up. We have a strategic planning session on Wednesday morning with Ethan and the executive team. I'll need you to present some preliminary consumer insights on one of our retail portfolio companies. Think you can handle that with only 2 days to prepare?" Lauren felt a spike of adrenaline, equal parts nerves and excitement. "Absolutely. Which company?" "Henderson and Associates. They're a mid-sized department store chain struggling to compete with online retailers. Ethan wants fresh perspective on their target demographic and how to shift their positioning. I'll start the research first thing tomorrow morning." "Perfect," Victoria smiled. "I had a feeling you were the right choice for this role. Don't make me look bad." "I won't," Lauren promised. She worked late Tuesday night in her new apartment, surrounded by market research reports and consumer data on Henderson and Associates. The more she dug into their business model and customer base, the more she saw opportunities they were missing. By midnight, she had the skeleton of a presentation that she thought could genuinely help them pivot their strategy. Wednesday morning arrived with rain, and Lauren dressed in a sharp charcoal suit that she hoped projected confidence and competence. She arrived at the office early to finalize her presentation, running through it twice to make sure the flow was right and her talking points were clear. The strategic planning session was in the executive conference room, a much larger, more imposing space than where she'd had her interview. The executive team was already assembled when Lauren and Victoria arrived. Ethan at the head of the table, the CFO to his right, the COO to his left, and 3 other senior vice presidents arranged around the table. "Good morning," Ethan said, looking up from the document he'd been reviewing. His eyes met Lauren's briefly, and she saw a flicker of something, encouragement maybe, before his expression returned to professional neutrality. "Victoria, I understand you have some new insights on Henderson for us?" "I do. Lauren has done some preliminary analysis that I think you'll find interesting." Victoria gestured for Lauren to take the floor. Lauren stood, connected her laptop to the conference room display, and took a deep breath. This was it. Her first real test in this role, presenting to the executive team including Ethan. She needed to be brilliant. "Thank you for the opportunity to present today," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I've spent the past 2 days analyzing Henderson and Associates' current market position, and I've identified what I believe is a fundamental misunderstanding of their target demographic." She clicked to her first slide, showing demographic breakdowns and purchasing patterns. Henderson currently positions itself as a mid-tier department store for middle-aged consumers, primarily women aged 40 to 60. But when we look at the actual data on who's shopping there and what they're buying, we see a different story. For the next 20 minutes, Lauren walked them through her analysis. She showed them that Henderson's most loyal customers weren't middle-aged women, but actually young professionals aged 25 to 35 who came to the stores for specific categories, home goods and business casual clothing, that weren't well served by online-only retailers. She demonstrated that these customers wanted a tactile shopping experience for certain purchases but were being turned off by marketing that didn't speak to them. The opportunity here, Lauren concluded, isn't to chase online retailers on their own turf. It's to lean into what physical retail does well: immediate gratification, tactile experience, personal service, but targeting the demographic that actually values those things. If Henderson repositioned as the destination for young professionals who want to touch fabric before buying a suit or see how a lamp looks in person before committing, they could carve out a sustainable niche. She finished and looked up to find Ethan leaning forward, his expression focused and thoughtful. What would that repositioning look like in practice? He asked. Store redesigns to feel more modern and Instagram-worthy, since this demographic shares their purchases on social media. Partnership with emerging designers who appeal to professional millennials. Investment in apps that bridge online and in-store shopping. Let customers browse online, reserve items, try them on in store. And most importantly, retraining staff to provide the kind of personalized service that makes physical retail worth the trip. The CFO, a stern woman named Patricia, who Lauren had been introduced to on Monday, spoke up. What's the cost projection for this kind of overhaul? I haven't done a full financial analysis yet, but based on similar repositioning efforts I've studied, you'd be looking at significant upfront investment, probably 15 to 20 million across the chain. But the alternative is continuing to lose market share until Henderson becomes unsustainable. Ethan looked around the table. Thoughts? The COO nodded slowly. The analysis is sound. I've been saying for months that our current approach isn't working. If we don't make a significant change, Henderson won't be viable in 5 years. The risk is alienating their existing customer base, one of the VPs cautioned. The existing customer base is already shrinking, Lauren countered, calling up another slide. Their same-store sales have declined 18% over the past 3 years. We're not proposing abandoning current customers, just refocusing on where the growth potential actually is. Ethan studied the data for a long moment, then looked directly at Lauren. This is excellent work, especially for having only 2 days to prepare. I'd like you to develop this into a full strategic plan with cost projections and implementation timelines. Work with Patricia on the financials and present to the Henderson board next month. I'd be happy to, Lauren said, trying to keep the triumph out of her voice. Victoria, good call bringing Lauren in on this, Ethan continued. This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need. Victoria beamed. She's proving to be quite the asset. The meeting continued with other agenda items, but Lauren was flying too high to focus on much besides her success. She'd done it, proven herself in front of the executive team, impressed Ethan, shown that she deserved to be here. As everyone filed out after the meeting ended, Ethan caught her eye and gestured for her to stay back. Lauren's heart jumped, but she kept her expression neutral as she waited for the room to clear. Once they were alone, Ethan's professional demeanor softened slightly. That really was exceptional work, Lauren. You identified something our team has been struggling with for months and presented a clear path forward. Thank you. I'm glad I could contribute. More than contribute, you might have just saved one of our portfolio companies. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I want you to know that I meant what I said in Chicago. I'm evaluating you purely on your professional merit, but I also want to acknowledge that this can't be easy, working with me after everything. It's fine, Lauren said quickly. You've been nothing but professional, and I appreciate that. Good, because I'd hate to think our prior meeting was making you uncomfortable in any way. He moved toward the door, then turned back. For what it's worth, I'm glad you took the job. I think you're going to do remarkable things here. He left before she could respond, leaving Lauren standing in the empty conference room with her heart racing and her mind spinning. Every interaction with Ethan left her more confused about what she was feeling. Was it just respect for a good manager, gratitude for his kindness in Chicago, or was Cassie right, and there was something more developing between them? She pushed the thoughts away and focused on what she could control, the work. She had a full strategic plan to develop, and she was going to make it so good that there would be no question she belonged here. The next 3 weeks fell into a demanding rhythm. Lauren threw herself into the Henderson project, working closely with Patricia on financial projections and with the Henderson team on implementation feasibility. She discovered she loved the strategic complexity of the work, the way she could take raw data and transform it into actionable plans that could genuinely help struggling companies. She also discovered that working in close proximity to Ethan Cole was both easier and harder than she'd expected. Easier because he was an excellent boss, clear in his expectations, generous with feedback, willing to challenge her thinking without being dismissive. Harder because every meeting, every casual hallway conversation, every glimpse of him through his office windows reminded her of the man she'd met in Chicago, the one who'd been vulnerable and kind and heartbreakingly honest about his grief. She was walking past his office one Thursday evening when she heard a child's voice inside. Lauren paused, curiosity overcoming propriety,
and glanced through the glass walls to see a little girl with dark curls sitting at Ethan's conference table, coloring intently while Ethan worked at his desk. This had to be Lily. As if sensing her gaze, Ethan looked up and caught her eye. He smiled and waved her in. "Lauren, come meet my daughter. Lily, this is Ms. Hayes. She works with Daddy." Lily looked up, and Lauren saw Ethan's eyes in her small face, the same deep blue, the same intelligence.
"Hi," she said shyly. "Hi, Lily. What are you drawing?" "A ballerina. Want to see?" She held up a surprisingly detailed drawing of a dancer mid-leap. "That's beautiful. Are you a dancer?" "Uh-huh. I take ballet on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but today there was a pipe problem at the studio, so Daddy had to bring me here."
She said it matter-of-factly, like coming to her father's office was a normal occurrence.
"Well, it's nice to have you here. I bet you're the best artist in the whole office." Lily giggled. "Daddy says I'm better than him, but that's not hard because he can't even draw stick figures right." "Hey now," Ethan protested, but he was smiling. "My stick figures are perfectly adequate." "They look like spiders," Lily informed Lauren seriously.
Lauren laughed, feeling some of the professional tension that had been knotted in her shoulders for weeks finally ease. This was the Ethan from Chicago, the devoted father, the man who made terrible pancakes and showed up to every recital. Seeing him with Lily made everything he'd told her that night feel real in a way it hadn't before. "I'll let you two get back to work in art," Lauren said, moving toward the door. "It was lovely to meet you, Lily." "Bye, Ms. Hayes." Lauren returned to her office, but she couldn't stop thinking about the scene she'd witnessed. Ethan's gentleness with his daughter, the clear adoration in both their faces, the normalcy of bringing her to work when childcare fell through. He was a good father. More than good. He was present and engaged in a way that seemed rare for someone at his level. She was still thinking about it when she left the office an hour later, and she nearly collided with Ethan and Lily in the elevator lobby. "Sorry," she said, stepping back. "I didn't see you there." "No worries. We're heading out too." Ethan had his suit jacket slung over one shoulder, his other hand holding Lily's. He looked tired but content. "Say goodbye to Miss Hayes, Lily." "Bye. Can I show her my dance moves, Daddy?" "In the elevator? I don't think—" But Lily was already demonstrating a pirouette in the small space, her movements surprisingly graceful for a 7-year-old. Lauren applauded when she finished, and Lily beamed. "That was wonderful. You're very talented." "I'm going to be a prima ballerina," Lily announced. "Daddy says if I work hard, I can be anything I want." "Your daddy is very wise." The elevator arrived, and they all stepped in. Lauren pushed the button for the lobby, acutely aware of Ethan standing next to her, of the subtle scent of his cologne, of Lily chattering about her dance class. "Do you have kids, Ms. Hayes?" Lily asked suddenly. "No, I don't." "Why not?" "Lily," Ethan said gently, "that's a personal question." "It's okay," Lauren said, smiling at the little girl. "I just haven't found the right person to have kids with yet." "Daddy says that's important, finding the right person." Lily looked up at her father with such trust and love that Lauren felt her throat tighten. "My mommy was the right person, but she got sick and went to heaven. But Daddy says maybe someday we'll find another right person to be part of our family." "Lily," Ethan's voice held a note of gentle warning, and his ears were slightly red. "What?" "That's what you said." "I did say that, yes, but we don't need to share every private conversation with everyone we meet." The elevator reached the lobby, and they all stepped out into the evening rush. Ethan looked at Lauren with an apologetic expression. "Sorry about that. 7-year-olds have no filter." "Don't apologize. She's delightful." Lauren meant it. There was something refreshing about Lily's honesty, her uncomplicated view of the world. "Well, we should let you get home. Have a good evening, Lauren." "You too. Bye, Lily." "Bye." Lauren watched them walk toward the subway entrance, Ethan's hand protectively on Lily's shoulder as they navigated the crowded sidewalk. She felt something shift in her chest, a longing for something she hadn't let herself want in a very long time. She told herself the job came first, that everything else was secondary, that whatever connection she felt with Ethan needed to remain purely professional. But watching him with his daughter, seeing the care and love and dedication he brought to parenting, made her wonder if maybe Cassie had been right. Maybe some possibilities were worth exploring, even if they complicated things. Maybe some risks were worth taking. Lauren turned toward her own subway stop, her mind full of questions she didn't have answers to yet. But for the first time since arriving in New York, she let herself consider that her fresh start might include more than just a new job in a new city. It might include a new chance at something she'd thought she'd lost when Tyler betrayed her. The possibility of real, honest, complicated love. The Henderson presentation to the board was scheduled for a Friday morning in early December, exactly 6 weeks after Lauren had started at the company. She'd spent every spare moment refining the strategic plan, running scenarios with Patricia, and rehearsing her delivery until she could present the material in her sleep. Victoria had reviewed everything twice and declared it some of the best work she'd seen in her 15 years with the company. "You're going to knock them dead," Victoria said, as they prepared in the conference room 30 minutes before the Henderson board was scheduled to arrive. "Just remember, confidence, not arrogance. Let the data speak for itself." "I will," Lauren promised, arranging her presentation materials for the third time. Ethan arrived early, as he always did for important meetings. He was in full CEO mode, perfectly tailored suit, his expression serious and focused. But when he caught Lauren's eye, he gave her a small, encouraging smile that settled her nerves more than Victoria's pep talk had. "Ready for this?" he asked quietly as he took his seat at the head of the table. "As ready as I'll ever be." "You've done excellent work. Trust yourself." The Henderson board filed in, 7 executives who held the future of their department store chain in their hands and were clearly skeptical about taking advice from a woman they'd never met before today. Lauren recognized the look on their faces. She'd seen it plenty of times in Chicago. The polite doubt, the subtle dismissiveness, the assumption that she was too young or too inexperienced to know what she was talking about. She was going to prove them wrong. The presentation lasted 90 minutes. Lauren walked them through every aspect of her analysis: the demographic shifts, the purchasing patterns, the competitive landscape, the financial projections. She addressed their concerns before they could voice them, anticipated their objections, and backed up every recommendation with solid data. When the Henderson CEO tried to interrupt with a question designed to throw her off balance, she answered it so thoroughly that he sat back with a grudging expression of respect. By the time she finished, the skepticism in the room had transformed into something else: interest, engagement, possibility. "Ms. Hayes," the Henderson CEO said slowly, "I'll be honest with you. When Ethan said he had someone new on his team who'd identified issues with our strategy, I expected the usual consulting nonsense. What you've presented is the most comprehensive and actionable plan we've seen." Lauren felt warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you. I believe this approach can genuinely turn Henderson around." "So do I." He looked at Ethan. "I'd like to move forward with this. How soon can we start implementation?" Ethan's expression remained neutral, but Lauren saw the satisfaction in his eyes. "We can have a timeline to you by Monday. Lauren will be the point person on this project, working directly with your team." They spent another hour discussing logistics and next steps. By the time the Henderson board left, Lauren was exhausted but elated. She'd done it. She'd proven herself at the highest level, delivered results that mattered. As everyone filed out of the conference room, Ethan hung back. Once they were alone, his professional demeanor cracked into a genuine smile. "That was exceptional, Lauren. I mean it. You commanded that room." "I just presented the research." "No, you did more than that. You read the room, adjusted your approach on the fly, and won over people who came in ready to dismiss you. That's not something you can teach. That's instinct and experience." He paused. "You're wasted as a senior assistant. We need to talk about your career trajectory here because this level of strategic thinking deserves a bigger platform." Lauren felt her breath catch. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious, but that's a conversation for next week. Right now, I think you should take the rest of the day off and celebrate this win." "I have work to finish." "It can wait until Monday. Go home, Lauren. Order something decadent, call your friends, let yourself enjoy this success." She wanted to argue, but the genuine warmth in his expression stopped her. "Okay. Thank you, Ethan. You earned it." As she gathered her things, Victoria appeared at the conference room door. "I just got off the phone with Henderson's CEO. He's already talking about implementing your plan company-wide. Lauren, this is huge." "It feels huge."
Lauren admitted.
Because it is. This is the kind of project that makes careers. Victoria glanced at Ethan.
Did you tell her? Tell me what? Lauren looked between them. We're promoting you, Ethan said simply. Effective immediately. Director of Strategic Analysis. Your own team, direct reports, seat at the executive planning table. Lauren felt the world tilt. What? But I've only been here 6 weeks. And in those 6 weeks, you've proven yourself more than people who've been here for years, Victoria interrupted. This isn't charity or favoritism.
This is recognition of extraordinary work.
I don't know what to say.
Say yes, Ethan suggested, his eyes warm with something that made Lauren's heart skip. Say you'll accept the promotion and continue doing exactly what you've been doing. Yes, Lauren breathed. Yes, absolutely yes. Good. Victoria handed her a folder. New employment contract, updated salary and benefits. Look it over this weekend, sign it Monday. And Lauren, welcome to the executive team.
The rest of the day passed in a blur. Lauren tried to focus on finishing some work, but her mind kept spinning with the magnitude of what had just happened. 6 weeks ago, she'd been heartbroken and humiliated in Chicago, convinced her life was falling apart. Now she was a director at one of the most prestigious firms in New York, with a promotion that had taken her colleagues years to achieve.
She called Cassie the moment she left the office, standing on the busy Manhattan sidewalk with the December wind whipping around her.
I got promoted, she said without preamble when Cassie answered. What? Already? Lauren, that's incredible. It doesn't feel real. I keep thinking someone's going to realize they made a mistake. No one made a mistake. You're brilliant, and they're smart enough to recognize it. Cassie's voice turned sly.
Did Ethan have anything to do with this promotion? It wasn't favoritism, if that's what you're implying. I earned this based on my work. I'm sure you did. But did he seem happy about it? Lauren thought about the way Ethan had smiled at her, the pride in his voice when he'd told her she was wasted in her current role. He seemed pleased.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you feel about working more closely with him? It's fine, professional. He's a good boss, Cassie. That's all. Right. Keep telling yourself that. They talked for another 20 minutes before Lauren finally headed home, stopping to pick up an expensive bottle of wine and ingredients for a celebratory dinner. Her apartment felt cozy when she walked in, the string lights she'd hung last weekend casting a warm glow over the small space. She'd made this place her own in the past 6 weeks, framed photos from Chicago on the walls, her favorite books arranged on the shelves, a throw blanket from Cassie draped over the couch. This was her life now, her home, her success, all of it built on her own merit and hard work. She was halfway through preparing dinner when her phone rang. Unknown number, but with a New York area code. She answered cautiously. Lauren, it's Ethan. I hope I'm not interrupting your celebration. Her heart did a complicated flutter at the sound of his voice. Not at all. I'm just making dinner. Is everything okay? Everything's fine. I wanted to ask you something, and I wanted to do it away from the office where there's less pressure. He paused, and she could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Would you have dinner with me tomorrow night? Not as your boss, just as me, as Ethan. Lauren's breath caught. This was it, the line between professional and personal, clearly drawn and waiting for her to cross it. Ethan, I don't know if that's a good idea. You're my boss now more than ever. I know, and if you say no, I'll completely understand and nothing will change at work. But Lauren, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that night in Chicago. And seeing you here these past weeks, watching you work, talking to you, it's only gotten stronger. We barely know each other. That's not true. I know that you're honest even when it's hard. I know you're resilient and smart and capable of turning your worst moments into opportunities for growth. I know you make terrible decisions when you're heartbroken, but excellent decisions when you're focused. I know you deserve someone who sees your worth and doesn't take it for granted. Lauren felt tears prick her eyes. You learned all that from one conversation? I learned it from watching you rebuild your life, from seeing you walk into that interview with your head held high despite being embarrassed about our prior meeting, from observing how you've handled every challenge I've thrown at you these past 6 weeks. His voice softened. I'm not asking for anything serious, just dinner, just a chance to get to know you outside of work, without the professional boundaries. And if it gets complicated, If people at work find out, then we handle it like adults, transparently, professionally. But Lauren, I've spent the last 5 years being careful and controlled and making sure everything in my life was perfectly managed. And it's been safe, but it's also been lonely. You make me want to take risks again. She thought about Cassie's words, about staying open to possibilities, about not closing herself off because of fear. She thought about the way her heart raced every time she saw Ethan, the way she looked for excuses to talk to him, the way meeting Lily had felt like a glimpse of something she hadn't known she wanted. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Yes, dinner tomorrow." "Really?" He sounded surprised, almost boyish in his delight. "Really? But, Ethan, this can't affect work. If it doesn't work out between us personally, we have to be able to maintain our professional relationship." "Agreed, completely." She could hear the smile in his voice. "I'll pick you up at 7? I'll text you my address." After they hung up, Lauren stood in her kitchen with her phone pressed to her chest, heart pounding. She'd just agreed to a date with her boss, her CEO, the man who'd seen her at her absolute lowest point and somehow still wanted to spend time with her. This was either the best decision she'd ever made or the worst. The next evening, Lauren changed outfits 4 times before settling on a deep green dress that was elegant without being too formal. She left her hair down in soft waves and kept her makeup natural. When Ethan knocked on her door at exactly 7, she took a deep breath and reminded herself that this was just dinner, just 2 people getting to know each other. But when she opened the door and saw him standing there in dark jeans and a cashmere sweater, looking younger and more relaxed than she'd ever seen him at the office, her breath caught. This was Ethan without the CEO armor. This was the man from Chicago. "Hi," he said, his eyes warm as they took her in. "You look beautiful." "Thank you. You look nice too." "These are for you." He held out a small bouquet of white tulips. "I remembered you mentioning they were your favorite." Lauren's throat tightened as she accepted them. "I mentioned that once, in passing, 6 weeks ago." "I pay attention." His smile was slightly shy, vulnerable in a way that made her heart squeeze. She put the flowers in water and grabbed her coat, and they headed out into the December evening. Ethan had made reservations at a small French bistro in the West Village, the kind of place that felt intimate and cozy rather than flashy. "I wanted somewhere we could actually talk," he explained as they walked. "Not some sceney restaurant where we'd have to shout over the noise." "This is perfect." The bistro was tucked away on a quiet street, its windows glowing warm against the cold night. Inside, it was all exposed brick and candlelight, with soft jazz playing in the background. The host greeted Ethan by name and led them to a corner table that felt private despite the restaurant being full. "You come here often?" Lauren asked as they settled into their seats. "Used to, when Emma was alive. We'd get a babysitter once a month and come here for date night." He said it matter-of-factly, without the pain that used to edge his voice when he mentioned his late wife. "I haven't been back in years, actually, but I remembered how much I liked it, and I thought you might too." Lauren felt touched that he'd chosen somewhere meaningful to share with her. "Thank you for bringing me here." They ordered wine and appetizers, and conversation flowed easily. Away from the office, without professional boundaries to navigate, they talked about everything. Lauren's adjustment to New York, Ethan's plans for the company, their favorite books and movies, and the small details of daily life that revealed character. "Tell me about Lily," Lauren said over the main course. "What's she like when she's not charming everyone at your office?" Ethan's face lit up the way it always did when he talked about his daughter. "She's incredible. Smart, funny, determined. She's decided she wants to learn every language in the world, so right now she's teaching herself Spanish from YouTube videos. Never mind that she's 7 and can barely spell in English. She's convinced she'll be fluent by summer." "That's ambitious." "That's Lily. She gets an idea in her head and doesn't let go." He paused. "She asked about you, actually, after we ran into you in the elevator." "She did?" "Wanted to know if Ms. Hayes was Daddy's friend. I told her you were someone I worked with who I liked very much." His eyes met hers across the table. "She said you had a nice smile and I should invite you to dinner sometime. Smart kid." "She gets that from her mother." Ethan took a sip of wine. "Emma would have liked you, I think. She always appreciated people who were honest and driven. Can I ask you something? And you can tell me if it's too personal. Anything. Are you really ready for this? For dating again? Because I don't want to be a rebound or an experiment and moving on. Ethan set down his wine glass and reached across the table to take her hand. The contact sent electricity up her arm. I've been ready for a while now. I just didn't know it until I met you. That night in Chicago, sitting with you, listening to you, sharing things I haven't talked about in years. It reminded me that connection is possible, that I'm capable of feeling something beyond just going through the motions of daily life. But you barely knew me. Sometimes you can see more clearly in a stranger than in people you've known forever. There were no expectations, no history, just honest conversation. And in that conversation, I saw someone brave enough to be vulnerable, strong enough to pick herself up after being knocked down. I wanted to be around that strength, around you. Lauren felt tears threaten again. Ethan, I'm not as strong as you think. I made some really questionable decisions that night. You made one impulsive decision born from pain, and then you had the courage to ask a stranger for help. That's not weak, that's human. He squeezed her hand gently. And then you turned that painful experience into motivation. You left your entire life behind, took a risk on a new city and new job, and you've absolutely crushed it. If that's not strength, I don't know what is. When you put it that way, I sound almost impressive. You are impressive, deeply impressive. His thumb traced circles on her palm. I'm just hoping I'm impressive enough to deserve a second date. Lauren laughed, the sound bright and genuine. Let's get through this one first. They talked until the restaurant started to empty, until the waiter had refilled their wine glasses twice and cleared their dessert plates. They talked about Ethan's vision for the company, about Lauren's ideas for expanding the strategic analysis team, about the weird quirks of New York living and whether deep dish pizza was actually superior to New York style. They agreed to disagree. When they finally left, stepping out into the cold December night, Lauren realized she hadn't thought about Tyler once all evening. Hadn't compared Ethan to her ex, hadn't worried about being hurt again. She'd just enjoyed being with someone who made her laugh, who challenged her thinking, who looked at her like she was someone worth knowing. Can I walk you home? Ethan asked, offering his arm. I'd like that. They walked slowly through the quiet streets, their breath creating clouds in the cold air. When they reached her building, Lauren turned to face him, suddenly nervous about how this evening would end. I had a really wonderful time tonight, she said. So did I. Ethan moved closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. Lauren, I want to be very clear about something. I'm not interested in casual. I'm not interested in seeing where things go with no commitment. I'm at a point in my life where I know what I want, and if we do this, I want to do it right. What does that mean? It means I want to date you properly, exclusively, taking our time being honest with each other, building something real, but only if that's what you want too. Lauren's heart was racing. This was fast, maybe too fast. She'd only been in New York 6 weeks. She'd been single for less than 2 months. Every logical part of her brain was screaming that she should slow down, be careful, protect herself. But her heart was saying something different. I want that too, she whispered. Ethan smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Then he leaned down and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. Lauren melted into it, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling his heart beating as fast as hers. When they pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. I should let you get inside before we both freeze. Probably a good idea. Can I see you tomorrow? I know it's Sunday, and you probably have plans. I don't have plans. I'd love to see you tomorrow. Lily has a ballet class in the morning, but after that we usually go to the Museum of Natural History. She's obsessed with the dinosaurs. Would you want to come with us? Lauren pulled back to look at him. You want me to meet Lily? Officially, I mean? Only if you're comfortable with it. I know it's fast, but she already knows you from the office, and I don't want to keep my life compartmentalized. If we're doing this, I want you to be part of all of it. Then yes, I'd love to go to the museum with you and Lily. Ethan kissed her again, longer this time, and Lauren felt warmth spread through her entire body despite the December cold. When he finally pulled away and headed down the street toward his own apartment, she stood on her stoop watching him go, a smile she couldn't contain spreading across her face. This was insane. This was moving too fast. This was every dating rule she'd ever set for herself being thoroughly broken. And it felt absolutely right. Sunday at the Museum of Natural History was chaos in the best possible way. Lily was a bundle of boundless energy, dragging them from exhibit to exhibit with running commentary on dinosaur facts she'd memorized from documentaries. She insisted on holding both their hands as they walked through the dinosaur halls. And when Lauren complimented her ballet class outfit, Lily declared that Lauren was now her friend. "Can Miss Hayes come to my recital next month?" Lily asked Ethan as they stood in front of the massive T-Rex skeleton.
"That's up to Ms. Hayes," Ethan said carefully. "She might be busy." "I'd love to come," Lauren said, and Lily's face lit up. "Really? It's going to be the Nutcracker. I'm a mouse in the battle scene." "That sounds perfect. I wouldn't miss it." Lily beamed and launched into a detailed explanation of her costume, and Lauren caught Ethan's eye over his daughter's head. He mouthed, "Thank you," and the gratitude and affection in his expression made Lauren's chest feel full. They spent the whole afternoon at the museum, then grabbed hot chocolate from a street vendor and walked through Central Park as the winter sun started to set. Lily chattered nonstop, completely comfortable with Lauren's presence, occasionally grabbing her hand to show her something interesting. "I like her, Daddy," Lily announced as they walked toward the subway. "She's nice and pretty. Can she come over for dinner sometime?" "We'll see, sweetheart," Ethan said diplomatically. "That means yes," Lily informed Lauren confidentially. "When Daddy says we'll see, it always means yes eventually." Lauren laughed, and Lily grinned up at her with such open, uncomplicated affection that Lauren felt something shift in her heart. She'd never thought much about children before Tyler, and even with Tyler, it had been an abstract future concept. But watching Lily's joy, her curiosity, her complete trust in her father, it made Lauren understand what Ethan had meant about being grounded by something bigger than yourself. They dropped Lily off at Ethan's mother-in-law's apartment. She kept Lily on Sunday evenings so Ethan could prep for the week, and then Ethan walked Lauren home through the darkening streets. "Thank you for today," he said as they reached her building. "For being so good with Lily. It means everything to me." "She's wonderful, Ethan. You've done an amazing job raising her." "I've tried." He pulled Lauren close, wrapping his arms around her. "She really does like you. I can tell. The feeling is mutual." "So is mine," he murmured, and kissed her again. The next few weeks fell into a pattern that felt both surreal and perfectly natural. At work, they maintained strict professionalism. Lauren reported to Victoria, and while she interacted with Ethan regularly as part of the executive team, they were careful to keep things appropriate and focused on business. After hours, though, they saw each other constantly. Dinners at quiet restaurants, walks through different neighborhoods, movie nights at Ethan's apartment after Lily was asleep. Lauren met Ethan's mother-in-law, Carol, who welcomed her with surprising warmth. "Ethan needs someone," Carol said over tea one afternoon when Lauren had been invited to Sunday dinner. "He's been alone too long, carrying everything by himself. I'm glad he found you." "I'm glad I found him too," Lauren admitted. The Henderson implementation was progressing ahead of schedule, and Lauren's new role as Director of Strategic Analysis was everything she'd hoped for. She hired 2 junior analysts to help with the workload, mentored them the way Victoria had mentored her, and found she loved the leadership aspect of the job almost as much as the strategic work itself. Cassie visited for a weekend in January, and Lauren showed her around Manhattan with the confidence of someone who truly made it her home. They were having brunch in the West Village when Cassie brought up what they'd both been carefully not discussing. "So," she said casually, "you're dating your boss." "I am," Lauren confirmed. "And it's going well?" "Really well. Better than I expected, actually." "You look happy, Lauren. Actually happy. Not just things are fine happy. It's a good look on you." "I feel happy. Cassie, he's amazing, patient and thoughtful, and he treats me like an equal partner in everything. We can talk for hours about anything. And Lily is incredible, and being part of their life feels right in a way I can't quite explain." "You're in love with him." Lauren paused, her coffee cup halfway to her lips. "What?" "You're in love with him. I can hear it in your voice, see it in your face. The question is, have you told him?" "It's only been 2 months. That's too soon to know if it's love." "Says who? There's no timeline for these things." Cassie leaned forward. "Do you love him?" Lauren thought about Ethan's smile when she said something that made him laugh, the way he held her hand in movie theaters.
The careful way he checked in about her comfort level as their relationship progressed. The morning he'd shown up at her apartment with soup when she'd been sick, and the way he'd tucked her into bed and read to her until she fell asleep.
Yes, she whispered. I love him. Then tell him. What if it's too soon? What if I scare him off? Lauren, that man looks at you like you hung the moon. Trust me, you're not going to scare him off by telling him how you feel. That evening, Lauren went to Ethan's apartment for dinner. Lily was at a sleepover with a friend from ballet, and they had the place to themselves, a rarity they both treasured.
Ethan cooked while Lauren set the table, and they moved around the kitchen with the easy familiarity of people who'd been together much longer than 2 months. Over dinner, Ethan told her about a new acquisition the company was considering, asking for her strategic input the way he always did. They developed this pattern of blending their professional and personal lives seamlessly, both bringing their whole selves to the relationship. After they'd cleaned up, they settled on the couch with wine, Lauren tucked against Ethan's side, his arm around her shoulders. "Can I tell you something?" she said quietly. "Always. That night in Chicago when you walked into my hotel room by mistake, I was at my absolute lowest point. I felt broken and humiliated and completely lost. And you sat with me and listened and made me feel like maybe I wasn't as much of a disaster as I thought." "You were never a disaster, Lauren." "Maybe not. But you made me feel seen in a way I'd never been seen before. Even Tyler, in 2 years together, never really saw me the way you did in one night." She turned to look up at him. "And these past 2 months have only proven what I started to suspect then. You're kind and patient, and you challenge me to be better. You make me laugh. You make me think. You make me want to take risks I'd normally be too scared to take." "Lauren, let me finish." She took a deep breath. "I know it's fast. I know we're supposed to take our time and be careful and not rush into anything. But Ethan, I'm in love with you. I think I started falling that night in Chicago, and I haven't stopped since." Ethan's eyes were bright with emotion. He set down his wine glass and cupped her face in both hands. "I love you too. I've been wanting to tell you for weeks, but I didn't want to pressure you or make you feel like you had to say it back." "You love me?" Lauren felt tears spill over. "Completely. Absolutely. In a way that terrifies me because I know how much it hurts to lose someone you love. But you're worth the risk, Lauren. You're worth everything." He kissed her then, deep and passionate and full of promise, and Lauren felt like she was finally truly home. Not in New York, not in her apartment, or even in Ethan's arms, but in this moment, in this feeling, in the knowledge that she was loved by someone who saw all of her and chose her anyway. They made love for the first time that night, slow and tender and achingly sweet. Afterward, wrapped in Ethan's sheets with his arms around her, Lauren felt a peace she'd never experienced before. This was what she'd been searching for all along. Not just a relationship, but a partnership. Not just someone who wanted her, but someone who chose her every day. The months that followed were a blur of happiness punctuated by the normal challenges of blending lives and navigating a relationship in the public eye. When they finally went public at work, carefully, transparently, with HR approval and clear boundaries about their professional relationship, there were some raised eyebrows, but mostly support. Victoria pulled Lauren aside to tell her she was happy for them both, and even the junior analysts who'd initially been intimidated by Lauren seemed to relax when they realized she was human enough to fall in love. Lily's Nutcracker performance in February was everything Lauren had hoped for. Watching the little girl dance across the stage in her mouse costume, fierce and focused, while Ethan gripped Lauren's hand and beamed with pride, felt like being part of something bigger than herself. Carol sat on Lauren's other side, and when the performance ended, she squeezed Lauren's hand and whispered, "Welcome to the family." In March, Lauren flew back to Chicago for the weekend to visit Cassie and pack up the last of her things from storage. Walking through her old neighborhood felt strange, like visiting a life that belonged to someone else. She drove past Tyler's apartment building without feeling anything except mild curiosity about whether he still lived there. "You're completely over him," Cassie observed over drinks that evening. "I was over him before I even left Chicago," Lauren admitted. "He was the catalyst for change, but Ethan is the reason I stayed changed." "Have you talked about the future, marriage, more kids?" "We've talked around it. He knows I want marriage eventually, and I know Lily wants siblings, but we're not rushing. We're both okay with just enjoying what we have right now." But that changed in April. On a Saturday morning when Ethan took Lauren and Lily to their favorite breakfast spot in Brooklyn. They were waiting for their food when Lily suddenly announced, "I think you should marry Daddy." Lauren nearly choked on her coffee. "What?" "You should marry Daddy," Lily repeated matter-of-factly. "Then you could live with us all the time instead of just sometimes. And you could be my actual mom instead of just Daddy's girlfriend."
Ethan's ears were red, but he was smiling. "Lily, we've talked about this. That's not something you ask people in the middle of a restaurant." "But I want Lauren to be my mom." "Don't you want her to be my mom?" "That's between me and Lauren, sweetheart." Lily turned to Lauren with absolute seriousness. "Do you want to be my mom?" Lauren felt her throat close up with emotion. She looked at this beautiful, brilliant 7-year-old who'd welcomed her into their lives with such open trust, and then at Ethan, whose expression told her he very much wanted to hear her answer. "I would be honored to be your mom," Lauren said softly. "But that's a big decision that grown-ups have to make carefully." "That means yes," Lily informed Ethan. "When grown-ups say things have to be decided carefully, it means yes eventually." Ethan laughed, and Lauren couldn't help but join in. "You're going to be trouble when you're a teenager, aren't you?" "Probably," Lily agreed cheerfully. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan and Lauren sat on his couch talking about what Lily had said. "I'm sorry if that put you on the spot," Ethan began, but Lauren stopped him with a kiss. "It didn't. She asked a fair question, and I gave her an honest answer." Lauren took his hand. "I love Lily. I love you. I love this life we're building together.
"And if you were to ask me to marry you, I'd say yes." "Good to know," Ethan said, his eyes twinkling. "Very good to know." 2 weeks later, Ethan took Lauren back to the French bistro where they'd had their first date. They had the same corner table, the same wine, and halfway through dessert, Ethan got down on one knee and pulled out a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. "Lauren Hayes, you walked into my life by complete accident and changed everything. You made me remember what it feels like to hope, to dream, to want a future beyond just getting through each day. I love you, and Lily loves you, and I can't imagine our lives without you in them. Will you marry me?" Lauren was crying too hard to speak, so she just nodded frantically and held out her shaking hand for him to slide on the ring. It fit perfectly, a simple emerald surrounded by small diamonds that caught the candlelight. "Is that a yes?" Ethan asked, grinning. "Yes," Lauren managed. "Yes, 1,000 times, yes." The restaurant erupted in applause. Apparently their waiter had noticed Ethan's nervous energy and alerted the staff. Champagne appeared, and strangers toasted their happiness, and Lauren felt like she was living in a dream. They set a date for October, a year and a half after that fateful night in Chicago when Lauren had thought her life was ending. The wedding was small and intimate, held in the garden of the estate where Ethan and Emma had gotten married. Carol was there, crying happy tears and welcoming Lauren officially into the family. Cassie was maid of honor, and she spent half the reception telling anyone who would listen about how she'd known from the beginning that Lauren and Ethan were meant for each other. Lily was flower girl, and she took her responsibilities very seriously, practicing her walk down the aisle for weeks beforehand. On the actual day, she scattered petals with perfect precision, then gave Lauren a huge hug before taking her seat. When Ethan saw Lauren walking down the aisle in her simple white dress, his eyes filled with tears. She reached him and took his hands, and the officiant had to pause for a moment while they both composed themselves. "I've got you," Ethan whispered. "I've got you too," Lauren whispered back. Their vows were personal and honest and full of references to that night in Chicago, how a wrong hotel room had led to the rightest thing in both their lives, how pain and humiliation had opened the door to hope and love, how sometimes the worst moments become the best beginnings. When they were pronounced married and kissed to enthusiastic applause, Lauren felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be, not just in this moment, but in this life, with this man, with this beautiful little girl who was now officially her daughter. At the reception, Ethan pulled her aside during the dancing. "There's someone I want you to meet," he said, leading her to where an older woman sat at a table near the dance floor. "Lauren, this is Sarah. She's the woman who was working the hotel desk that night in Chicago, the one who gave me the wrong room key." Lauren's eyes widened. "You found her?" Sarah smiled warmly. "He tracked me down a few months ago to thank me for the mistake. I told him I was just glad something good came from my error." Something good is an understatement, Ethan said, pulling Lauren close. You changed both our lives with that wrong key. They talked with Sarah for a few minutes, and Lauren marveled at the chain of events that had brought her here. If Sarah hadn't made that mistake, if Ethan had gone to the correct room, if Lauren had sent him away instead of asking him to stay, none of this would have happened. Later, as they were leaving the reception to head to the honeymoon suite at the same hotel where they'd gotten ready, Lily ran up to hug them both. I have two parents now, she said, squeezing tight. A daddy and a mom. I'm the luckiest girl ever. We're the lucky ones, Lauren said, kissing the top of her head. We get to be your parents. Ethan scooped Lily up for one more hug before Carol gently extracted her to take her home for the night. As they drove away, Lily waved frantically from the back window, and Lauren waved back until the car disappeared from view. In their hotel suite, Ethan pulled Lauren into his arms and just held her for a long moment. What are you thinking? She asked. I'm thinking about how that night, when I walked into the wrong room and found you crying, I had no idea I was walking into the rest of my life. He pulled back to look at her. I'm thinking about how grateful I am for every twist of fate that brought us here. Even the painful ones? Especially the painful ones, because they taught us what we needed to know to appreciate this. Lauren thought about Tyler's betrayal, about the humiliation and heartbreak that had driven her to that hotel room. She thought about Ethan's grief, about losing Emma and learning to live again. She thought about all the wrong turns and painful lessons that had prepared them both for this moment. I'm grateful too, she said. For all of it, even the parts that hurt. They stood at the window looking out over the New York skyline, the same view Lauren had seen from her office that first day, when she'd been terrified and uncertain about the future. Now, wrapped in her husband's arms with a family waiting for her and a career she loved and a life that exceeded every dream she'd ever had, she felt nothing but certainty. This was her life, her love, her future. And it had all started with a wrong hotel room and the right stranger. Lauren turned in Ethan's arms and kissed him, deep and slow and full of promise. They had the rest of their lives ahead of them, challenges to face, joys to celebrate, a daughter to raise, maybe more children to come. They had work they loved and people who supported them and each other to lean on through whatever came next. But in this moment, they had this perfect crystallization of two broken people who'd found each other by accident and chose each other on purpose. Over and over again, building something real and lasting and true. I love you, Lauren whispered against his lips. I love you too, Ethan whispered back, for the rest of our lives. And standing there in the warm light of their wedding night, in the city that had become their home, Lauren knew with absolute certainty that the worst night of her life had led her to the best decision she'd ever made, opening that hotel room door and asking a stranger to stay. Because sometimes the wrong room is exactly where you're meant to be.